You probably already know this, but Dylan Roof has been convicted in that Charleston church massacre. Many people said that was a false flag and it was fake, but apparently the court doesn't think so. A jury in South Carolina convicted Dylan Roof in the shootings that killed 9 black church members during a Bible study in Charleston last year, a verdict that could lead to a death sentence for the self-avowed white supremacist. Jury 9 whites and 3 blacks convicted him. So there you go. I still think that photograph of him was a little bit weird. I still think the Afrikaner badges from antiquity, symbolizing his support of apartheid, I suppose, of which clearly he knows nothing. Most people don't. Those badges still look superimposed over his photograph to me, and I only saw them once, and they magically disappeared, or at least I couldn't see them anymore. And let's see, looking over the Drudge Report here quickly, just a couple of interesting headlines. You know, Matt Drudge is one of the most vilified people in the world, vilified by the mainstream media. But all he does, I repeat, is post links to stories. That's it. I mean, you would have these people would have you think that he writes everything that's on there, and it's simply not true. But here's one. Fakebook is the big headline here, to label news. In other words, Facebook will label what is news and what isn't, right? More electoral threats, put bullet in mouth, long shot bid to block Monday. It is a long shot. It won't happen. I don't think it'll happen. Maybe, but I don't think so. And let's see, border surge, illegal immigration hits new high. Simultaneously, Venezuelan parents give away their children amid deep crisis. And then again, since we are a nation of immigrants, after all, irrespective of the fact that we're full now, thank you, from dailymail.co.uk, Mexican immigrant married an American woman so he could get a green card and then murdered her with the help of his real wife. I tell you, my breast swells with pride at the welcoming attitude of this absolutely ridiculous excuse of an administration, starting with you, Mr. President. Now, here's some more from dailymail.co.uk. Hey, how about this? Don't see one American outlet running it, but here it is. Exclusive. Ex-British ambassador, who is now a WikiLeaks operative, claims Russia did not provide Clinton emails. They were handed to him at a D.C. park by an intermediary for disgusted Democratic whistleblowers. Craig Murray, former British ambassador to Uzbekistan and associate of Julian Assange, told DailyMail.com he flew to Washington, D.C. for the emails. He claims he had a clandestine handoff in a wooded area near American University with one of the email sources. The leaker's motivation was, quote, disgust at the corruption of the Clinton Foundation and the, quote, tilting of the primary election playing field against Bernie Sanders. Murray says, quote, the source had legal access to the information. The documents came from inside leaks, not hacks. Regardless of whether the Russians hacked into the DNC, the documents WikiLeaks published did not come from that, Murray insists. Murray is a controversial figure who was relieved of his post as British ambassador amid allegations of misconduct, but is close to WikiLeaks. Don't really know what the misconduct was. Actually, he was cleared of those allegations, but left the diplomatic service in acrimony. So there you go. He was cleared of the accusation of misconduct. Where's the American press? Answer, nowhere. In the meantime, the press is full of plenty of this. Michael Moore, Donald Trump is going to get us all killed. After he's done with that, he's going to declare a state of emergency to permanently seize power. There's a common fear that's starting to congeal among the left about the threat of Donald Trump occupying the Oval Office. The snowflakes are now beginning to actually melt. Isn't that sad? When the next major terrorist attack occurs on American soil, kiss your civil rights goodbye. Giving a voice to this fear, Michael Moore took to Facebook on Tuesday to let loose a barrage of well-earned rage at the laziest, most dangerously incompetent president-elect in American history. I want to make sure that you know who put this rubbish out there. TheDailyBanter.com, written by Justin Rosario. Hey, Maine. A hey, Maine out to Justin. It's one thing to have a president who is asleep at the wheel, but my friends, it's a whole other thing to now have a president-elect who refuses to even get behind the wheel. This utter neglect of duty, a daily snub at the people who work to protect us, the first commander-in-chief to literally be AWOL and announcing proudly he isn't going to change. This, I assure you, is going to get a lot of innocent people killed. This is that fool, Michael Moore. Now, back to the writer's part of it. If only a successful terrorist attack were the extent of the damage Trump will do, it would be a tragedy, but not an existential threat to the country. But this is Donald Trump we're talking about, and as Moore points out, it promises to be so much worse. So here's Moore, or should I say, moron. So, my fellow Americans, when the next terrorist attack happens, and it will happen, we all know that, and after the tragedy is over, amidst the death and destruction that might have been prevented, you will see Donald Trump acting quickly to blame everyone but himself. He will suspend constitutional rights. He will round up anyone he deems a threat. He will declare war. And his Republican Congress will back him. Well, where were you, Michael Moron Moore, when the NDAA came into effect? I believe that was under your pal, your best friend, Barack Obama's watch. Wasn't it? Here's some more so we can really get into what do the snowflakes say? Oh yeah, hating on him. If this sounds like pure fantasy, you've apparently forgotten what happened in the immediate aftermath of 9/11/2001. By the time the rubble had been cleared several months later, the United States was already torturing suspects, creating legal fictions to bypass the Geneva Conventions against war crimes, and preparing to bomb Iraq as a prelude to an invasion based on 100% fabricated evidence. So you, Michael Moron, Trump has already said, I don't need to hear the same intelligence briefings every day. You've heard Mr. Trump say, these are the same people who claim weapons of mass destruction and provided all this phony intel that led to an invasion of Iraq. But you think he's AWOL and should be going to the briefings, I presume, is what your idiotic rant is about? Well, let's enjoy some more. When this next terrorist attack takes place, it is you who will be charged by the American people with a gross dereliction of duty. It was your job to pay attention to protect the country, but you were too busy tweeting and defending Putin and appointing cabinet members to dismantle the government. You don't have time for the daily national security briefing. Don't think we're going to let you use a modern-day burning of the Reichstag as an excuse, as your excuse to eliminate our civil liberties and our democracies. Well, obviously the civil liberties are still intact and will be for a while because an idiot like you is permitted to have any coverage at all. Michael Moron. We will remember that while the plot to kill Americans was being hatched, your time was consumed by whom you saw as the real threat to America, Alec Baldwin in a wig. No, Alec Baldwin is just a loon. He's a pretty good actor, actually. I thought 30 Rock was funny. He liked to, he enjoyed his cameo just a little bit too much, and they had a little bit too much lipstick on him in The Aviator when he played Juan Tripp, and he turned around with his lips pursed with too much lipstick on. That was not a flattering look. But he did all right. The thing that gets me about Alec Baldwin, did you ever see the movie where he played a psycho killer? To me, he played that role just a little bit too well. But as is the case with most of these people who make a bunch of noise to the negative side of things, he's probably the nicest guy in the world if you knew him and talked to him just as a person rather than some sort of a news icon of sorts and freaking out and calling his little girl names. And I mean, that's terrible, but I'm familiar with what happens to your head if you have a divorce. Seen it many times. Okay, what else do we have? Yeah, well, so why this? From freebeacon.com, U.S. accelerates deployment of troops to Poland and the Baltic states. So I guess Obama and his best friends, the Clintons, are not finished trying to prod the Russian bear into some sort of a response that will justify their aggressive actions. Now, look, I'm going to say this again. I just feel like I have to. I'm not squeamish about visiting violence upon the deserving, with weapons or without. And I'm talking about criminals. Those are the deserving, not just somebody who disagrees with me. I mean a criminal who's about to do something bad to a person in furtherance of theft or maybe just entertainment. But I do not want our volunteer military being used as a mercenary force, and I do not see what's to be gained by continuously rattling our sabers. Haven't we had enough Vietnam? Haven't we had enough Afghanistan? Have we not had enough Iraq? And the American people stopped ground troops being sent into Syria. Congratulations. You also threw Hillary White Trash Clinton off her little throne that she imagined she was sitting on, and pushed her and her career, along with her disgusting excuse of a man, that would be her husband Bill, into the toilette of history, where I suspect they will remain. There's no way out of the toilet for these people. They're there. Morgan Chalfant wrote this article in the Free Beacon. The United States is accelerating its deployment of troops to Poland, the Baltic states, and Romania, meant to ensure security in the region, according to Polish and U.S. defense officials. An armored brigade combat team based at Fort Carson, Colorado, is going to Zagan in western Poland in early January, and will send an additional U.S. battalion. I have no idea how to pronounce this name. Orzysz. Orsitz. I'll do it that way. In northeast Poland at the start of April, according to officials. So, Obama's trying to do as much damage as he can. And if you could get us into a third world war, an official third world war, a lot of people think the third world war is already underway, but if he could get something on with the Russians, he would love to do that. Because he has nothing else to do except make problems. Electors are being harassed, threatened in a bid to stop Trump from the New York Post, a disgusting publication at best, a pathetic publication at worst. Electors around the country are being harassed with a barrage of emails, phone calls, and letters, and even death threats in an effort to block Donald Trump from being voted in as president by the Electoral College on Monday. The bullying is overwhelming Sharon Geis's tech devices for her resolve, but not her resolve to support Trump. The Mesa, Arizona grandmother woke up Wednesday morning to more than 1,500 emails demanding she not carry out her legal duty to vote for the president-elect. She told the Post they just keep coming and coming. She's received more than 50,000 emails since the election. They're overpowering my iPad, she said. Her answer, mass delete. Good girl. Despite the avalanche, she said her decision to back Trump is stronger than ever. And she said, obviously their minds are made up and they're not going to change. I'm not either. Reports of GOP electors being badgered have been reported in numerous states, including Georgia, Idaho, Tennessee, Arizona, Utah, and Michigan. Like Geisa, Republican Patricia Allen of Tennessee told the Post she's been bombarded with 2,000 emails, 120 letters, and 5 phone calls, all urging her to switch and vote against Trump. But Allen, 74 years old, said that despite the siege, she's not budging. She said, this has never happened before. Do you know how long it takes to delete all those emails every day? She's also been solicited by, wait for it, a Harvard University group, backed by constitutional law professor Lawrence Lessig, Lessig, who has offered free legal aid to electors who change their vote. Allen said, that borders on bribery. Carried to this extreme, the day might come when an elector could be sold to the highest bidder. Lessig claims that 20 GOP electors are considering voting against Trump. Even if true, that wouldn't be enough to alter the outcome when the 538 members of the Electoral College gather to cast their official votes. Trump has 306 electoral votes, 36 more than the minimum required. Let's see. For Michael Banarian, a senior at Oakland University in Michigan and a Republican elector, the harassment comes with a dark side. He said he's been getting death threats via email, snail mail, Twitter, and Facebook. He's 22 years old, and Banarian told the Post on Wednesday, somebody threatened to put a bullet in the back of my mouth. In Utah, a group called Democracy and Progress PAC placed full-page ads in Salt Lake City's daily newspapers telling electors they are not bound to vote for Trump, who won the state. But the Desert News reported that under Utah law, Trump must receive all the state's electoral college votes since he won the election in the state. One of them, Salt Lake County Councilman Richard Snellgrove, said there's no way he'll cave into the pressure. No, he said, Trump won the Electoral College fair and square. So all I can do is just say, go to hell. You pathetic excuses for human beings for self-actualized men and women. You pathetic, disgusting, Democrat, progressive liberals. You make me sick. And at the same time, you make me laugh. Kind of an upper and a downer at the same time. You know what I mean? Like taking a sedative and drinking a lot of coffee to wash it down. I love watching these people writhe in their failure of their ideology, the failure of their dishonest political party, and the failure of themselves individually. I guess these were the people that played those t-ball games at which no one kept score so that everybody would win. Well, you didn't win. You lost, and badly. And I say again, if all the illegal aliens who voted, if all the people who voted multiple times, and if all the dead people who voted were taken out of the tally, Mrs. Clinton would have lost even worse than she already did. And I hope her failure drives her to more madness than she's already suffering. Now here at the New York Post, celebrities beg electors to be heroes and vote against Trump. And of course, who's the poster idiot for this one? Martin Sheen. Celebrities are teaming up to beg Republicans in the Electoral College to vote against President-elect Donald Trump, pledging their respect for potential heroes. A slew of other has-been and B or C-list celebs have piled on, calling for 37 conscientious Republican electors to swing the December 19 Electoral College vote away from Trump. This preachy little punk, over-the-hill, has-been, Martin Sheen, says in his message, Republican members of the Electoral College, this message is for you. As you know, our founding fathers built the Electoral College to safeguard the American people from the dangers of a demagogue and to ensure that the presidency only goes to someone who is to an eminent degree and down with the requisite qualifications. Goes to someone who is to an eminent degree, okay, and down with the requisite qualifications. I'm not asking you to vote for Hillary Clinton. Some in the video say, just don't vote for Trump. As you know, the Constitution gives electors the right to vote for any eligible person, a celeb in the video states. By voting your conscience, you and other brave Republican electors can give the House of Representatives the option to select a qualified candidate for the presidency, said Richard Schiff, S-C-H-I-F-F, who played the communications director in that show, The West Wing. What is evident is that Donald Trump lacks more than the qualification to be president. He lacks the necessary stability and clearly the respect for the Constitution of our great nation. You people are over with. You know what? This is what we need to do. Don't watch any more of their movies. Don't give these pukes one thin dime. Reject them, ostracize them, quit buying their product, and run them into destitution. So whose civil liberties were taken away and by whom? Well, that would be George Bush, first, with his bogus war, and the bogus 9/11 attack. We know it is. And Joseph Farrell's going to talk about that in a little bit. Dr. Farrell, he is. And let's see, what about the NDAA? Oh, yeah, that was under Obama's watch, where you can be arrested by the military or anybody they designate, quarantined in the minimalist comforts of a concrete holding cell until hell freezes over with no charges, no lawyer, and no phone call. That's Obama. Barack, the name of Mohammed's horse. Psst. Ridiculous. All right. That's enough of that. Now on to some good stuff. People who sent me this letter told me that they would be happy if I read it on the air, so I'm going to do it. You ready? Here it is. Right here. And this, the envelope, please. This is what they included with the letter. Dear John B., I'm Dennis Midget from Harlingen, Texas. My lovely bride of 47 years and I both graduated from Mesquite High. Just a couple of thoughts. Americans have a cow if inflation goes up 10%. The bills that are included were currency in Zimbabwe. You know, because everybody over there had to be free. It used to be Rhodesia, and it was a functioning country, but now it's Zimbabwe. Their peak month of inflation in Zimbabwe is estimated at 79.6 billion %. This is true. Now get this. Other websites estimated at 500 billion %. Mugabe thought the way to curb inflation was to simply print more money, then print more, then print more. Sound familiar? We're longtime caravanners. I agree with 99.9% of your guests. Remote viewing is a little woo-woo, and your short interludes are okay. I prefer Toby Keith or Willie, and not Whitesnake or Who Shot Sally. Noted. Whitesnake. Did we really play that? Do you remember them from your years at the zoo? That would be the mighty KZEW 98 FM in Dallas, Texas, who was on its backside when I got there, but with the help of the genius programmer Tom Owens, who decided he liked me okay and pretty much let me do whatever I wanted, we went to the top of the heap with the 6.5 share. I personally got a 23.8 share, and then I got fired. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. I like it. Do you remember them from your years at the zoo? We liked your programs. Also listen to K-Box, KLIF, and War. Well, you can still listen to KLIF, sir, because we do ARC Midnight from 10 until midnight, Saturday night, and you're in Texas, so Central Time, on radio station KLIF. And I get to play a lot of stuff that was new back when KLIF was one of the stations that was even available to listen to. KLIF and K-Box and some other ones. KFJZ. Yeah. Good days. Of course they were. I was a child. I didn't know what was going on in the world, really. Remember Johnny Carson's Karnak the Magnificent? Well, one night he had his pink turban on, held the envelope to his forehead and said, "The Wicked One from the West, a Culvert, and Hillary Clinton." He then tore the end of the envelope, pulled out the card, and it said, "Name a witch, a ditch, and a..." Starts with a B. Can we say biatch? Okay. If you're ever in the beautiful Rio Grande Valley, we have a spare bedroom for you. We'll take you to South Padre Island and Louis' Backyard. That's where you can get a garbage burger, the best burger on the earth. It even has peanut butter and jelly in it. I know about Louis' Backyard. John, we include you in our prayers every night. We know you're one of the few fighting the good fight. We would be honored if you read this on the air. One last thing, being curious. One night I looked in my Funkin' Wagnalls for Shanksville Flotsam and Jetsam, but I couldn't find it. Know why? Because it warn't none. God bless and keep up the fight. Dennis and Cleon Midget, Midgett, Harlingen, Texas. God bless you, sir and ma'am, and thank you very much for your prayers. I can use them. Now, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Are you ready for this one? From the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, yes, this is not a joke. $10 trillion. $10 trillion Zimbabwean dollars. There's another one in here, too. Let's see what's on it. $50 million. Okay, so I've said it before and I'll say it again. No, I won't. You find me one spot, yeah, I will. You find me one spot in the world where a Mugabe is president that runs right, and I'll smooch your backside on both sides. But I'm not worried about it because it ain't going to happen. Ain't. There's a word I like to use every once in a while just to keep it alive. However, I haven't seen warrant in a while. All right, let's get on with the magnificent he-man of an interviewee, and that would be Excelente Celente himself. So why don't we just get into it? Gerald, you're looking fit and strong as usual. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind compliment.
I'm so happy that Hillary Clinton got trounced. I'm so happy that the snowflakes are fleeing for their safe zones. I'm so happy that they spent all that money on a recount that only resulted in more votes for Trump. And I saw him talking with some of the tech guys, just a little clip, and he says, look, there's no official chain of command here. You need something, you pick up the phone, you call me, and I'm going, yes, a godfather-like approach to running a business. Are you as happy about him winning the election as I am?
It's not a question of my being happy. Trump, a lot of his values don't represent mine or nor Clinton's, so neither of them. But as a trend forecaster and a political atheist, I call things for what they are, not the way I want them to be. So we have done a 180 in our forecast for the economy since Trump has gone in. And we're on record on doing this as soon as it happened. He's going to be, as we're seeing it now, very positive for the economy. And so on those kind of levels, and plus his stance on no more of these toppling foreign leaders of other countries and no less foreign entanglements, I'm all in that camp. And when you look, John B. Wells, at who he's picked for his cabinet positions, and you really nailed it when you said, there's no chain of command. You pick up the phone. He has a corporate cabinet. He's going to run the government like a business rather than a political enterprise for the Bloods and the Crips, or as people prefer to call them, the Democrats and the Republicans, the murderers and thieves.
That's good. I missed that one. I get it. The red and the blue. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's all they are. They're murderers and thieves. How much more of our money do they have to steal in names of too big to fail and tax breaks and loan guarantees for their buddies? And how many more wars do they have to start and slaughter millions of people based on lies? So let's call a spade a spade. So I'm pleased that Trump is in there also because I'm tired of this, again, the Bloods and the Crips running the country, and with their arrogant attitude of, oh, no, these are only campaign contributions. Hey, how about calling them bribes and payoffs?
Yeah.
So now we have a guy in there that's used to doing business, and the people he's brought in. There's Tillerson, Ross, Wilbur Ross, Mnuchin. I mean, whether or not you like the way these guys, anything about them, the fact is these guys know how to do tough business. And if they do it in the best interests of we the people, boy, we'll be in much better shape. So we're saying that, again, you could go back to our trend alerts, trends in the news broadcasts. We're saying, oh, no, the economy is going to look much better under Trump than we've seen it in a very long time.
Let me ask you this. You don't have to go here if you don't want to, but I'd like to know, what are some of the values you pick up that don't agree with yours?
Well, I don't agree with the, building the military bigger. We're spending, John B. Wells, $22 billion a year, more than 14 of the other nations combined. Oh, Russia, let's watch out for Russia. How much are they spending? Oh, 66 billion. Again, I don't want a bigger military, and I'm not in favor of, again, my personal belief, I'm not in favor of hydrofracking. They're coming out with you can't pump, millions of gallons of tainted water with chemicals in it into the earth and not expect it to screw up a couple of things. So issues like that. But on the other issues, as I said, I'm all in favor of what he's doing economically and geopolitically. I want peace, and he does too, in the sense that he's a businessman, and I also think that they're going to renegotiate these lousy trade deals. So it's going to be better for America. But those are the issues that I don't agree with them. The other guy they brought in, no, I don't want to give the national forests to be, raped by the corporations. They got a lot of dirty deals going on already, particularly that have been put in place for a long time. So the national forests are ours. No, don't privatize them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really am. I personally think that I'm with you on the enlarging the military. I think what we need is a really strong, really specialized, very well equipped. I think we need to position ourselves as peace-loving people who are the last people on earth that you would ever want to mess with, because we're going to hurt you so bad if you force us into a situation that you're going to become incontinent at just the sight of our flag or the mention of our country's name. But other than that, I'm done with using our soldiers as mercenaries and sending them over into these undeclared conflicts and getting them all shot to hell and wounded and then coming back and then dumping on them big time because they can't get any service out of the Veterans Affairs department. You know, I'm with you on that, definitely. I think the key to it is, like, mind your own business. And I think it would have been an absolute disaster in the Middle East if Hillary Clinton had gotten in there.
Oh, the blood on her hands? These little liberal cowards. How many wars, how many people has Bill Clinton killed? He was bombing Iraq every 4 days. People forgot that. Mm-hmm. Sanctions he put on Iraq. Over 500,000 Iraqi children under the age of 5 dead, according to the United Nations. And there's Madeleine Albright, or not all that bright, on Leslie Stahl on CBS. And Leslie Stahl asks her, is the death of 500,000 Iraqi children under the age of 5 worth of sanctions? And that arrogant woman says, yes, it is.
Yeah, just as long as it's not her kid.
Yeah. Oh, I could tell you a quick story.
Anything you want.
It was on the QE2. This is going back to 2002. And it was it was just up and down the East Coast. And there were 3 keynote speakers. This is for the top marketing executives in the world. Madeleine Albright, another person. I'm second day, and another person the third day. She opens it up. They gave her an introduction, so help me God, it went on for 15 minutes. She was born in Czechoslovakia. Her father was this. She went to that school, graduated with honors here, did this and did that. And by the way, she looked like the Queen of Tarts. She's all in this red thing. And she's sitting there, and it's going on and on and on. The next day, I go up on the stage. Thank you very much, Mr. Salenti, the author of, the publisher of the Trends Journal, director of the Trends Research Institute. Here's what The Economist says about him. Here's what the Wall Street Journal says about him. International best-selling books, blah, blah, blah. Appears on all these shows, Oprah Winfrey, blah, blah, blah. Man, I get up on the stage. I said, thank you very much for that introduction. It's very nice of you. I said, however, I feel a bit shortchanged after hearing Madeleine Albright's introduction last evening. The crowd broke out laughing because everybody felt the same exact thing, the arrogance of these people. And then I said to the guy, what you also failed to mention is that I graduated PS 76 in the Bronx without honors. So that's my Madeleine Albright story. It's all about them. And that's what's different with Trump. He's not a politician. And I have political background. I was the assistant to the secretary of the New York State Senate. So I know what the deal looks like. So Trump is good because it's the death of politics. John B. Wells, you go back to October, and you had people like Paul Ryan, the guy who's playing Speaker of the House. I think he was Eddie Munster before that, not supporting Trump. He did it without the parties. That's what this whole election is about. It's one of our top trends. Make it new. Trump didn't just defeat Clinton. He beat Obama. The traitor-in-chief, the guy that lied himself into office as an anti-war president, going to close Guantanamo in 1 year, folks. Yeah, I don't have to hear any more of that folk crap from him anymore. I'm sick of him calling us folks. Hey, folk you. And he beat him. They lost the Senate and they lost the House. And he campaigned more than any sitting president in modern history. My legacy depends on, hey, your legacy, they told you what to do with your legacy. He lost. Silicon Valley lost. The Zuckerbergs, the Eric Schmidts, thanks to Julian Assange with WikiLeaks, we saw that the top of Silicon Valley was behind the Clinton campaign. And they lost. The best algorithms, they lost. Hollywood, yeah, the Katzenbergs and the Spielbergs, all in an iceberg. They lost $100,000 a plate dinners. They lost. The actors, the De Niros, the Clooneys, they lost. The Bon Jovis, the Springsteens, they lost. The rappers, the Jay-Z, they lost.
Yeah, Kanye came out on top, though, didn't he?
Yeah. What's her name? Beyonce?
Yeah.
They lost. The point that I'm making, the major media, they lost. The major media lost so bad they're crying now. You know, I better watch out. I'm on your show. This could be fake news. They're coming out with that fake news crap because they got beaten so bad. So what I'm saying is make it new. Everything that I went through is showing that there's nothing there. The people are tired of their crap. It goes beyond politics. They're tired of the crap that Hollywood puts out, one damn sequel after another. Hey, you think it could come out with a fresh idea? Silicon Valley, one thought. In the Valley, the major media, one of our top trends, 2617. Rest in peace, R.I.P., Fourth Estate, gone, gone. One after another. Make it new. It's there for you to create whatever you want. Trump proved it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. What about the? What about those emails? You know what I think is really funny is no one has said that the emails that were leaked were false or contrived. It's just like, well, but the Russians were working against. They were messing around our electoral systems. Like, well. You know, a case could be made for, even if that were true, which I think is patently false. I suspect it was somebody in the our own security services that leaked those mails, but that's just me. But let's see, which is better? Let's see, the Russians helped Trump win because maybe they didn't want World War III with Hillary Clinton at the helm, with her most certainly to have been imposed no-fly zone over Syria. Erdogan already shot down one of the Russians' jets, and there was no blowback for that. That was a NATO country, shot down a Russian jet. So, but these morons would rather have Hillary in there because she'll be the first woman president and because she's a liberal. They'd rather face World War III because they're worried that, was it Rex Tillerson, right? He's CEO of Exxon, and he's done business with the Russians. It's like, well, do you want to do business with them, be friends with them, or do you want to pull out the nukes and get it on with them? You idiots. I mean, I just can't bear it, Gerald.
Oh, I can't either. They're such hypocrites, the liberals. They're such disgusting hypocrites. You just went up Hillary Clinton also. I mean, you saw that other clip of her. When they found out, they asked her, how did you feel when Muammar Gaddafi was killed? And she said, we came, we saw, he died. Yeah, they should have taken her out with a straitjacket.
Seriously, what kind of a psycho would say that? And the other psycho up there, Obama, telling the world, I'm pretty good at killing people. What the hell kind of a president says something like that? What kind of a president says something like that?
A psychopath.
Yes.
An arrogant psychopath with a bad attitude. I'm so happy to see him gone. A nothing of a man gets other people killed. Assad has to go. Gaddafi has to go. Hey, Junior, you want to take him out? If you call him out, take him out. Lead the charge. And then he goes out the night when he said that Gaddafi has to go, the United States starts bombs away. He jumps on a plane, a trip to Rio with him, his wife, his kids, and his mother-in-law. That's a fact.
You know,
so I have to tell you, as much as George W. Bush should be brought up on war crime charges for leading us into the Iraq War. Who knew what, when? All of these people, everybody, we were writing about it was all BS when it was happening. There were guys, Scott Ritter, a whole bunch of people. No weapons of mass destruction. They're not there. I would love to see War Crime Tribunal. As much as I despise George Bush, the arrogance of that traitor-in-chief Obama, lying his way into office, robbing us of our rights, giving Wall Street a free ride, didn't convict one of them. Not one of them.
Yeah.
A liar-in-chief. So I am glad he's gone, and I hope I never see or hear the name Clinton again for the rest of my life.
What do you make of these electors being harassed, threatened with death, and being beaten about their faces if they don't flip their vote from Trump to Hillary? What do you make of that?
It's what Trump said about if he was accusing the Russians of doing what they're doing, if he was on the other side, they'd call him a conspiracy theorist. So it's okay for them to do it. Again, you said it. The book Double Down, where Obama says, I'm really good at killing people, killed over 4,000 innocent people, according to human rights groups, with drone strikes. They let him get a free ride. So that's the hypocrisy of the liberals. They could commit the crimes and call it whatever they want, do what you're saying with the Electoral College. But here's the deal, John B. Wells. In a month, none of what we're talking about with the Electoral College, with Russia, is going to be news or be of any importance. It's a whole new game, and the little crybabies are crying their way out with fake news, with conspiracy theories about the Russians, and also harassing people with the Electoral College. And as you pointed out, the recount showed that Trump actually got more votes. So that's what they're doing. They're losers. They're little babies.
You know what I think? I think that if the illegal aliens vote had been taken out, the dead people who voted, the people who voted multiple times, and nobody saw a vote flip from Hillary to Trump, we only saw votes that were flipped from Trump to Hillary. If all that voter fraud and fakery were taken out of the equation, I think she would have been absolutely stomped through the floor. I really do.
Again, I have to also say that, I am so happy that that information came out from WikiLeaks to show you what a fraud the whole Democratic Party is, and what a criminal operation the Clinton Foundation is. So, when you look, we've never had an election in modern history where both candidates, by the way, had such high negativity ratings. But again, that's the past. And as, it's the golden rule. Those who have the gold rule. When the economy gets better, and I believe it's going to, and more jobs are created, you're going to start seeing more and more. Oh, I could give you a fact already. The latest poll taken of small businesses, they've not been this optimistic since 2009. And that's when the liar-in-chief came in, who's going to be the salvation, hope and change. You could believe in Obama, and you could believe in small change of a penny. When he came in, there was this great hope. That's the level now where businesses, small businesses, are looking at the future with Trump. So the Democratic Party is going to become insignificant. In the next 2 years, Trump is going to be able to do everything that he wants. Whether you like what he does, don't like it, that's the fact as I see it, and we see it here at the Trends Research Institute, because there is no Republican Party to stop him. He will go around, do anything the way he wants to do it, just like he won the election.
So you don't see him stealing the election through this Electoral College vote flip? I don't either. I think it's just noise. Now,
so all of that's what I'm saying. All this is noise. They're little babies crying that they lost, and they're making noise. Fake news, Electoral College, Russian. They're little nothings. They're nothings. You said it before about war. We're respectful. We're nice. If you screw with us, we'll kill you.
All of you. You want to risk that or what?
But that is not what these people are. They don't have that kind of courage. They're little slimy political lowlifes. They don't know how to fight. So that's why they're doing with this noise.
Don Gerald. How I wish you were my brother.
So we are.
Well, yeah, we are. But I mean, blood brother. So we'd have to sit around, over the holidays, and do a family get together and just drive the rest of the family crazy, pull them all into our head trip, and then send them out into the world to spread the word. What about these pathetic universities? What the hell's happened to our universities? I know it was a hotbed when there was a Vietnam, the first truly undeclared war. Of course, Korea was undeclared, but that was a police action, and we were in there, 3 years or something. But what about these universities? It's gone from talking politics, and again, when the draft was going on during the Vietnam era, I can understand. If there was a draft now, I suspect there'd be more blowback against these undeclared conflicts. But there isn't a draft now. They abandoned this ridiculous idea of requiring women to register for the draft. I don't know what or who was thinking that one up, but I suspect they were on the hard left. But how do you dislodge these professors who are just filling these kids' heads with fascist or socialist or communist ideas or a hybrid of all three? Other than what happened to this woman who is teaching human sexuality and went on a rant about Trump's election having been, like, you really need to teach human sexuality to college kids? Really? No. I think they've got that. But I digress. So she goes on a rant of how Trump's election is tantamount, I'm paraphrasing, but only slightly, to the 9/11 attack. Okay? It was an act of terrorism. And the thing that really bothers her and people she knows is that the people who are part of this terrorist assault are among us, whatever that means. So she gets all this blowback. They're threatening everything from, go to a communist country if you want to be communist. You try and preach that stuff or bring it here, we'll put a bullet in your bleeping face and stuff like that, which is a bit strong, but okay, sent the message. She fled the state. But she's expected to return after the end of the semester and the beginning of the next one. So other than, going into draconian mode with those sorts of threats and so forth, how do you deal with these professors who seemingly cannot be dislodged from their lofty perches, who are filling kids' minds with nothing but poison except for the ones that are actually hip and blow it right back, like the one who video recorded this woman doing her rant, who is now facing charges because that's against the code of student conduct or whatever. Change colleges. Forget about it, How do you deal with those colleges? What's up there?
Well, first, before I get to the college, you mentioned the Korean War. And who ended it?
Eisenhower.
That's right. 5-star general, supreme commander of the Allied forces.
Yep.
During World War II. He ended it. Rather than campaigning as he was running for president, he was over there ending it. And that's the difference in what I said when I said these little boys that shoot pool, play basketball, drive pickup trucks, and go to basketball games and call themselves commander-in-chief.
Yeah.
Compare that to an Eisenhower. A real man. He knew the horrors of war firsthand and wanted no part of it. As he leaves, we all know his famous farewell address warning the American people that the military-industrial complex is robbing the nation of the genius of the scientists, the sweat of the laborers, and the future of the children. A general, not a little boy, not a little political pawn with a pair of cojones smaller than a mothball. He was a man, and it goes back to the universities. It all leads up to it. They have robbed us of the genius of the scientists, the sweat of the laborers, and the future of our children. That's why we have such a disgusting education system. It's not only at the university level. Go down to kindergarten. Go through K-12. Oh, I got it. Let's put a no-bullying zone around.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, don't show them how to stand up for yourself. No, we're going to have a no-bullying zone. What I'm saying is that is just a reflection of the entire disgusting education system that is one of the most expensive in the world, and as the facts show, we don't even win, place, or show against OECD nations in the important levels of math, science, history, go up and down the line. We don't even win, place or show. So it's the entire education system stinks. If it was worth a dime, you would think we'd have the problems that we have. But that brings us to one of our top trends for 2017.
And what would that be?
VR-ED, virtual reality education. The industrial age model is the one that they built the education system on by the Germans.
Yes.
Teach people how to read, write, do some arithmetic, but most of all, put them in a centralized location so they could follow orders. And that's the kind of education system you have. So when you're talking about these low-life college professors, follow orders. I'll tell you what to think, what to do, how to behave. And I've never worked a day in my life, by the way. All I did was pass a bunch of stupid tests so that I could teach you nothing. But now with virtual reality education, we're in an age now of going from industrialization to robotization. It's an artificial intelligence, virtual reality world, like it or not. So now you have this, when we go to the next level of this, beyond even the headsets that we have, you have a young person sitting in a virtual classroom. And now with all the testing apparatuses to get much deeper into the psyche and sensitivities of a young person or an older one, you find out what they're good at, what they're best at, what their passion is. A word that's not allowed to be spoken among the universities and the education system. Passione doesn't count. You're not allowed to have any. Get rid of your heart. We're going to teach you general education. So you get that back in the student. Now you're designing courseware and putting that student in a virtual classroom being taught by the best in the world. We are on the cusp of a new education system, to us that's going to be one of the biggest life changers and mind expanders that we've ever seen, probably in recorded history.
And so, the Department of Education needs to go. Done.
Gone.
I predict.
They're worthless. They're worthless. They have no place. The federal government has no place in the education system. Name me just one federal agency that does such a spectacular job.
Nothing.
Let's start with the Defense Department, because everybody likes them the most.
Let's start with the post office.
Yeah, the post office. Well, look what that thing has become, huh? Holy Christ.
No, they don't. Nothing runs right. You know, the thing is, I was talking with a guy last night on his radio program. He's a real bright kid. He really is. Ryan Gables is his name. If you ever get an invitation to talk with him, you'll enjoy it. And I said, you know, I believe that if there was some way to really have the all-seeing eye, that's not an Illuminati reference for people who are prone to become paranoid over potential conspiracy theories, by the way. If there was some way to be able to see into the real apparatus of this government, I think it would be absolutely frightening, because there is such potential for chaos there, because everything is so compartmentalized, and the people down the hall don't know what the people on the other end of the hall are doing. They don't know what the people on the floors above them and below them are doing. They get it in briefings, whether it's the security services or any federal agency whatsoever. They don't really know what's going on. It just seems like the whole system is right on the razor's edge, and it could just tip over left or right at any time. In other words, it's so big, so screwed up, and everything is so far down the road. I am shocked that it runs as well as it does.
Well, again, that's what the Trump presidency is going to be different. It's a corporate government, and he's going to run it like a business. So you don't have cabinet secretaries. You have senior vice presidents. That's the way it's going to be run. And then you look at the level of people he's bringing in, like Tillerson and Wilbur Ross and Mnuchin. I mean, these guys are loaded. They got a lot of dough. They're not going to take orders. They're going to do business. Now, how are we going to make this work out best? What should we do? Okay, let's do it. Okay, go. Goodbye. See you later. That's the way it's going to work, rather than a political system where the way you get to the top is by sucking your way up. Look, I told you that I was the assistant to the secretary of the New York State Senate at 24 years old. I used to run political campaigns in Westchester County, which at that time was the richest county in the United States. Mayor Yonkers, I was the number 2 guy at a graduate school running his campaign. It's a city of 300,000 people, not small. John B. Wells, my job up in Albany was the worst job I ever had in my life. I'd be in the back of the chamber, BSing with my buddy, and they have a guy, a sergeant at arms, a flunky to open the door for these clowns to walk in that we're paying for. They can't open the door by themselves. I'd be talking to my pal, and he'd leave me, and he'd follow the senator to his seat, and he'd pull out the chair and push it back. You could blow on these chairs and make a move. It's big, luxurious leather chairs that go way back so these guys can relax, And he'd come back, and I'd say to my friend, he said, "What's the matter, man? Cat can't sit down by himself. He needs some help." And he said, "Gerald, you have that kind of an attitude. You're not going to make it here." I said, "Listen, that's not the way I grew up." Before I knew what the word meant, my mother, may her soul rest in peace, used to say to me, "I hate cowards." So I would never do anything to disrespect my mother. So when I talk about the difference between a Trump campaign and a political campaign, running a political office and a corporate office, politicians, the only way you get to the top, and all you were talking about, all these failed agencies, is that you suck your way up to the top. You bend over and you suck your way up to the top. That's how you get higher up. That doesn't work in business, not in real business. You have to produce. So that's why the Trump presidency is going to be very different than the rest. It's outside the political system is dead. It's gone. He just proved it.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'll give you a quick story. But my cousin, his nickname's Sonny, V.L. Wells, made it to major. And I said, well, you're a whatever. He said, no, I only made it to major. He goes, I never really did what was best for me in that regard. I figured I'd wind up eventually, 1-star general something. He goes, I'll give you an example. He said they had he was a very serious fighter pilot, flew the Phantom, flew B-57 Canberras, having a big time dropping chaff over Nam, unarmed, right? And I remember when my son asked him, well, when you were flying some of these aircraft, did you ever let off the cannon? And the way Sonny said, yeah, was with reverence and with a sense of it's a serious thing to let off that cannon. So you knew that he had let off that cannon at somebody. But it wasn't any kind of it was just the way he said, yeah, when my son asked him if he let off the cannon. Well, so he's in charge. They're having gunnery practice. So here comes and you got a fault line. You can't let that gun off. You fly your airplane down there. You cannot go past that fault line and let your gun off. And he said there was this, he said the squadron commander was this cocky guy. One of these guys who would do absolutely anything to win. So when he said he brought that gun down so close to the target that there was stuff hitting his aircraft when he went past. So I threw him off the range. Fault, threw him off the range. He goes, and then after that I was passed over for every promotion that I came up for.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
That was it. He said, man, maybe I should have said, yeah, good shooting, sir. He goes, but I didn't. I threw him off the range.
Yep.
But he also said, and I learned this later from other people, the guy walked up to him and said, I guess you have no idea that you are the most respected pilot that any of us have ever flown anywhere around, let alone with. And Sonny didn't really know what to say because he's just that kind of a guy. Whenever he would shake your hand and say goodbye, he turned and he walked away. He didn't look over his shoulder. Goodbye meant goodbye. He's gone. You know what I mean? Just one of those guys. And I don't know what's happened to the men in this country, these young men. It's almost as though my graduating class was the last of the backside kickers. The ones that came behind us just got weaker and weaker and weaker until now it's a pathetic fit of violence, but no technique. They think they can give a punch, but they can't take one. Because part of being a tough guy, right? I don't mean a thug. I mean, but a part of being a man is it's important to be able to take a punch as well as give one. And I don't think these people can take a punch. They just wet their pants. I'll put it that way. I would have said something else, but I'm the host. I got to be dignified here.
Well, there are a number of issues in why this is happening. And how many children are born to single-parent families in America?
When we were kids, you knew nobody who was divorced. Now you'd be lucky if you find somebody who's married. Well,
again, this is even single-parent, not even divorced, never been married.
There you go.
So it was 5% when I was a young guy. Today it's 41%. So they don't have that masculine teaching. I was a kid, I grew up in a bit in the Bronx and then Yonkers. You never went home crying. And, you learned how to fight. I was the little guy. They used to try to pick on me all the time. And so it was a different way of, without going into stories, it was you learned how to fight and take care of yourself. Didn't mean you got into fights. You try to avoid them at all costs.
Right.
But that, again, they make a society where you have a no bullying zone. What do you mean no bullying zone? What are you going to walk out of the bullying zone and then it's okay to get beaten up? So what I'm saying is the men aren't men anymore because they're not being brought up like that. It's very hard to become a man without a father. Sorry. I'm not me. I bless every day. I thank, from the family I came from, how fortunate I am and all they taught me. How blessed. And the other issue is that when you're looking at these young kids, think of how they're grown up. All these kids were, quote, special and amazing. They got so much hot air blown up there. You know what? When I was a kid, it was you better shut up. You're not going to go out with me. You stepped in, you stayed in line. But now they could do anything they want. They were special and amazing. Oh, yeah. Why? Bradley split the atom at 7 years old. Yeah. What have they done? They're kids, for God's sakes. What do you think? I mean, I didn't grow up under a rock. I didn't know anything. I didn't start learning, until my mid-30s. I started putting a lot of pieces together. Before that, you're a kid. But they pumped up these kids, and they're nothing. They're kids. So they have this attitude, and you even see how much in music they talk about attitude. Hey, I got my own attitude. Keep your attitude to yourself. Attitude doesn't buy you anything. Doesn't build your brain bigger. But attitude is the way. That's why, that's why we don't have young men anymore. They're still little boys. And all you have to do is look at the boy leaving the office now. Barack, the liar, the traitor, Obama. The community organizer that never organized anything in Chicago, becomes a president and has the arrogance to go after Trump and say, he doesn't have any experience. What experience do you have? Yeah. You lied your way into office. And he is the perfect example, to me, of what the men are in America. He exemplifies how low they've fallen.
Yeah. More to your point, do we believe that the teachers who have decided not to keep score at the T-ball game so that everybody wins, do they really not understand that they've made it to where everybody loses? Not everybody wins, everybody loses. And do we think that they really believe what they're doing, or are they just taking a paycheck and doing what they're told?
Probably both, but they're pretty stupid. Look at the system that they developed. Again, it's failing at every level. The facts are there. It's not a value judgment. We don't win, place, or show in OECD comparisons, and look at the lousy jobs that kids are getting out of school with, and the enormous debt. When I went to school, I went away to school, it was $2,000 a year. That included room and board.
Yeah.
Look at the joke you have now. Young people getting out of school with $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 worth of debt. for degrees in worthlessness. Oh, yeah, I got a degree in gender studies. Oh, terrific, man. That'll get you far. No, I got one in history and social sciences. Terrific, man. Great. You can learn all the history you want in books. You don't have to go to school. How about a trend forecasting course? No. You're not allowed to look ahead. You're not allowed to think for yourself. You're in the public education system.
That's right. That's extraordinary, isn't it? I got another one for you. Now, are you okay with all these questions? Is there a bright spot in your scope that you want to talk about, or are you good with this?
Well, again, the bright spot is virtual education. It's great. You look at the economy. It's going to be, we're seeing it much better. But I want to put that together quickly because gold prices are going down, which we had forecast they would. We've done a 180 on this whole thing.
That's what Harry Dent said, and everybody said he was crazy.
Because the dollar is getting so strong.
Yep.
And now let's take what that means globally. Money's flowing out of China as the yuan hits 8-year lows against the dollar. The dollar's hitting 14-year highs. They can't stop the money flows going out. And Trump is 100% wrong when he says China's trying to devalue their currency. They just went through over 20% of their reserve currencies trying to prop up the yuan. They have a real problem, $70 billion worth of outflows last month. They need a stronger currency.
Oh.
So what I'm saying is, now go to the emerging markets. They borrowed all this money in dollars, and now the dollar's getting stronger as their currencies are getting weaker. How are they going to pay back the debt? The currencies are weak. They need more of their currencies that they don't have to pay back the loans that they've taken, both corporate and country. So when we talk about gold, yes, gold is going to stay weak against the dollar. However, if you live in China right now, gold sales are up 25%. There's two very different markets. There's physical and the ones they play with the commodities.
Right.
Bitcoins in China, it's driven the price up 34% because of all the people in China. And remember, it's a country of 1.35 billion people. We only have what? We don't even reach the 0.35 over here. We're what? 0.32. What I'm saying is, it's a big world out there. Look what happened in India when they pulled all the cash out, 80 to 90, almost 90% of the cash out of the system. And you can read the quote by Modi, the prime minister. They want to turn it into, quote, a cashless society. So read one of our top trends for 2017, going cashless. So they could control every penny that you have, know where you spent it. So putting the big picture together with one of our trends is that, there's going to be a lot of economic disruptions here. The United States may do very well, but this strong dollar is not only going to hurt the exporters in this country, which isn't a big one, however it will, but more so, you're going to start looking at a lot of problems. Look at the dollar against the euro now. It's down to almost $1.04. So, and it's going to reach parity very soon. And by the way, when it first came on, I was in Italy in 2000. I think it was 2002, 2001, maybe 2000, I forget. But anyway, it was 86 cents, the euro to the dollar. So now it's going to go back. We're looking at those levels. So what I'm saying is this strong dollar, what's good for America is not going to be good for a lot of other countries. But we're the only country that we should be caring about as I look at it. And I'm an American. Yeah, my blood is Italian, but my heart's American. I could never be me if I was born over there. I'm so grateful to be here. So it's an America first situation. And when we look at the global economy, we really need to look at it, I believe, in that sense as well.
More to your point, and actually to maybe even up the ante a little bit here, so to speak. If suddenly millions of illegal immigrants leave this country and millions more are prevented from coming in, that's going to make the dollar stronger still, because you got fewer people and the same amount of cash. So if we really want to see some of these things like gold go through the floor, which a lot of people don't want to see that, but if we did want to see it, if that was wanted, you have fewer people inside the country moving this money around, and the dollar's going to get stronger still. That's my opinion. I'm not an economist, but that's what it looks like to me. If you have 100,000, you got $100 in your whole economy, and you got 10 people, okay, good. Now you got $100 in your economy and you got 50 people, that's not as good. You got 200 people in the country and you only got $100. Now you got a problem. That's what I'm thinking. What do you think?
I think it's a little bigger than that. I don't think that was going to affect it that much. I think the bigger issue is that he's going to grow the economy, what Trump did, for example, with Carrier. This guy's not even elected, and he does this deal. So, yes, they're keeping jobs here, some are leaving, but he's reversed the trend, and that's the most important thing, of jobs leaving the country. Will there be more leaving? Yes, but he's reversing the trend. Going back to the strong dollar and gold, we had forecast gold to go about $50 lower than where it is over a month ago, when it was well into the 1200s. And what we're saying is gold has a bottom because it's a global economy. I mentioned China. China buys more gold than anywhere else in the world. India is number 2, and they're trying to prevent gold purchases in India because the people are trying to get out of their worthless rupees and buy gold. So what we're saying is gold to us is still a safe haven asset, but it's not one that we see that's going to go, when our forecasts were that once it would hit over 1,400, it would skyrocket. That would have probably happened under a Clinton administration. We don't see that under a Trump one. But the economy in building it, we believe, is going to be more about almost being able to put more people to work at higher wages. Not because the government sets the wage, but going back to what you said, supply and demand. Because the more people make, the more they spend. With the corporate tax breaks, cuts they're giving, and the deregulation, corporations will make more. So the tide will lift. And then the people that are here that have the lower paying jobs, that sector will stay where it is, but the other ones, for instance, in the college educated that aren't moving up, they'll start moving up. And that to us is where the real growth will come from, because it'll regenerate a middle class that's been shrinking.
You know what really makes me sick? This is just going back to what we talked about before, but now you got all these celebrities lined up just begging for conscientious Republican electors to switch their vote to Clinton. Can you imagine such a thing? And you got some of these idiots out there that are calling for a coup and all this stuff. You know, maybe they just haven't had their faces rubbed in it enough. But let's say that this happens. Let's say that they decide not to give Mr. Trump his victory, and then it goes to Congress. You know, just to slow things down. Because my opinion is that the liberal left, the Democrats, anybody that can still be a member of that party, to me, needs to re-examine their motives for remaining in that party, but I digress. How should we react to this if they take it this far? Because I'm not going to do anything that Hillary Clinton or her government tells me to do.
There'd be a revolution. Trump is not going to let it happen.
All right.
There'd be a revolution. There'd be a revolution.
Okay, so
again, what they're doing, John B. Wells, as I see it,
yeah.
Again, they're concocting this fake news story. The Russians lost the election, made Hillary lose the election.
Right.
They're doing all of this because they're crybaby little losers, and they're trying now to use that, playing another card. That's all it is. And so we don't really see it going there. What it's doing here. Just 1 second. Phil, will you kindly go over to the piano over there? And there's a folder below on the chair there, the stool. It's white. Yeah. You know, we had a conference here last week, and we launched our top trends for 2017. And I showed the difference in what we're talking about, how the media went after Trump immediately after the election. USA Today headline story after he won, Trump to go into White House with 74 lawsuits. This is how they promoted Obama after he won. Here, here. Look at this arrogant little liar. Look at him. He was going to change the world.
Yeah.
Oh, I got to read you these headlines. Oh, they're beautiful. You want to talk about real stupidity? We got it right here, ladies and gentlemen, on the John B. Wells Show.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let me show you
Normally
this.
we just talk about treachery, betrayal, and Armageddon.
Yeah. Yep. Here. Look.
Yeah.
You ready for this? This is New York. All new. The truly radical politics of Barack, the liar-in-chief Obama. The truly radical politics. Folks, I'm going to clean up Washington when I get in there. Oh, yeah, you brought in the Clinton team and the Bush team. Oh, yeah, you're going to... Radical politics. Yeah, radical. Wins the Nobel Peace of Crap Prize and brings us to war and slaughters tens of thousands of people in Libya. It keeps getting better. Look at these pictures. Folks, look at this happy couple, huh? Yeah. Look at this. Thinking deeply here, right? Yep.
Genius.
Obama's America. Who we are now. Who we are now. Obama's America? Well, if you're Obama's America, who we are now, you're a liar. You'll lie your way into office or any job and do anything that you want. Oh, and you'll really be good at killing people. Who we are now. That's the way they pumped up Obama. Now these same little media prostitutes every day are attacking Trump. You don't see this kind of coverage. You don't see anything like that. You don't see this. That's the hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah. Hey, let's not forget about the fact that these left-wing scum, and that's what they are calling... have you heard this rape Melania thing? To me, that is just abysmally abominable.
Yeah.
It's beyond belief. At least our new First Lady, is a beautiful woman and doesn't look like a former football player, okay?
Again, you look at the hypocrisy right here. So going back to what's going on.
Yeah.
The mainstream media lost.
Badly.
And their little boys and girls, prostitutes, don't like to lose.
No, they don't.
So they're playing their dirty little game, and that's all this is. Again, a month from now won't make any difference at all. It won't make any difference, a little over a month. By January 20th, 21st, all gone. And the people will be traveling to Russia. We'll be doing trade together. The sanctions will go off. More business will be developing. And it's not only Trump that wants that. They just won a primary in France. If Fillon wants to do business with Russia. In Italy, they want to do more business with Russia. They all are tired of this losing wars. And so we see a very positive future as it's going now, and nobody can predict the wild cards. So our forecasts for 2017 are you can do anything that you want. It's all there for you. Trump proved it. Nothing exists. It's all a shell. He did it. We brought down Silicon Valley, the entertainment industry, Hollywood, the rappers, the music industry, to the major media. And another one, big one, make America great again. So when is again? That's one of our top trends, true nostalgia. Find out when America was great again as you believe. We're not telling people what to think. And bring that back. Bring it back in elegance, in grace, in style, whether it's in music or architecture, whether it's in art, whatever it might be, in product development, and play the Trump card. Trump showed that he did it his own way, crooked Hillary. So, make America great again? Well, let's say you're going to be in the sneaker business. And I'm going to put a line of sneakers out, made in America. And then what I'm going to do in playing the Trump card, I'm going to go up there near Nike headquarters, and I'm going to start flooding the airwaves and the media with ads. And our ad would be playing the Trump card, that Phil Knight, the head of Nike, getting his sneakers made in slave labor countries so he could become a billionaire and then bring them back over here and mark up the prices? Why, he's not an American. If you love America, you'll buy Pride in America sneakers. You play the Trump card. You take it out from the top. And that's what Trump did. He took out Jeb Bush first, and then everyone in order under him, he took them out, one after another. Bip, 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 bip. Play the Trump card, true nostalgia. The trends are there for everyone to benefit from them if they open their minds, open their hearts to what they are, rather than having a fixed notion on this is what I believe and this is what I want. No, you look at what's going on. The trend is your friend.
Yes, it is. You know, I just want to toss this out about how badly how badly they feel, and how hard they tried. See, to finish up on what I was saying about remaining a member of the Democrat Party is simply this: the left wing, which the Democrat Party is the representative party of the progressive left. They can't win anything unless they lie, steal, or cheat, or deny the spoils of victory to somebody who legitimately won. But do you know that in the run-up to the election, I've said this 2 or 3 times on the program, but you may already know it, but I just want to tell you this. If you went to your Android phone, powered by Google, and you typed in Trump, the predictive words that came up were assassinated and dies. If you did it on an iPhone, like you're typing a message, and you put in Trump, the words card and is would come up. This is a fact. I saw this with my own eyes. I conducted this experiment myself. So Google had actually put into their algorithm, or whatever it might be, it's predictive texting mechanism, that those words would come up as some sort of, I don't know, maybe the geniuses over there thought there was some subliminal message there. Trump assassinated. Trump dies. I mean, can you imagine such a thing in this country now? I personally can't. I don't have the words to describe how much I loathe that kind of behavior.
Well, again, I mentioned that WikiLeaks showed that Eric Schmidt from Google was a key player in the Clinton campaign.
Oh, yes.
And by the way, we talk about, you were talking earlier, and it slipped by, about what's going on in the government. Could you imagine if they really hacked into so many different emails to see what's really going on? We only got a hack from one guy's email.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how bad this thing really is?
Yes.
So going back to the Google story, they lost, but here's another one. They ran a story, it was in the Wall Street Journal, about how that showed that Google really went very liberal in this election. You know, the facts are there, just as you were pointing out. So it's a fact. It's a fact. And the other part of it is that even if Google and Facebook start taking shots at people like us and start doing things so we don't get our YouTubes or views or Twitter, there's something else is going to take its place. Again, make it new. They're all dying in their own way, and they won't admit it. So that's why they're taking these cheap shots.
You know, Kanye West is being vilified now on the New York Post, which is bought and paid for, of course. And it's funny. Now Kanye's taken heat, too, for everything he's ever said in his life that might have been said in jest or, you know, whatever. Guys talk like guys do, and girls talk like girls do. And if you've ever been privy to a conversation when the girls are getting a little wild with it, it'll drop your jaw because they can get every bit as rough as the guys can. It's absolutely extraordinary. And you talk about excoriating men in their lives that they've met. Oh, my gosh, you know, you don't want to know what they're really saying about you.
I know.
Yeah, just leave it alone. Just remember what my martial arts master always said. He summed it up beautifully. This is what he said. Woman completely different from man. And that's all he said about it, because those are the words, and that is the fact. One more thing that I don't think you and I have talked about maybe ever, and that is the Islamization of the country. Now, over the months and years, I've said for a long time, ISIS is us. Oh, look at this email. Look, Saudi Arabia and Qatar providing financial and logistic support to ISIL because this twit-in-chief up there wouldn't call it ISIS. He called it ISIL for the Levant, right? So I really believe that in the deep recesses of a few people's sick minds, starting with Barack Obama, and let us remember that Barack was the name of Muhammad's horse, and we're pretty sure that Barack Obama is not even his real name. I think that this guy was crazy enough that he, through his cronies, like first Holder, and then and now Jay Johnson, Department of Homeland Security, and Loretta Lynch is now his new AG after Holder decided, I think this is just about the right time for me to bail and go make some more money. I think that he's actually seeded this country with potential revolutionaries of the Islamic bent. I really do. What do you think about this?
No, I don't. As going back to Trump, why do we have this terrorism?
We started it.
You got it. If you or I mean, you're a fighter. I'm a fighter. I used to teach close combat for many years. You're a martial artist. And if a foreign nation came into my country because they didn't like the guy that was running it,
right,
and killed everybody I love, destroyed my nation.
Yeah.
I have no future. I'm a young guy. You think I could become radicalized? I'd want to blow your brains out in a second.
Yeah, several times.
So that's what nobody wants to talk about. Yeah, you got a refugee crisis over there in Europe. Gee, I can't figure out how it happened. Couldn't be because you destroyed Afghanistan, only there for 15 years. No. That's why you have all those Afghan people there? Nah. Had nothing to do with that. They just wanted to come there to go to the Oktoberfest. Look what you did to Iraq. How about Yemen? You were talking about the Saudis.
Yeah.
How about Obama working with those, quote, radical Islamists to overthrow Libya? That's a fact. Everybody knows that if you read it and study it. So when you look at it, John B. Wells, they've created a situation that breeds this. The people that he's putting in place, Eric Holder was a flunky under Clinton.
Yes, he was. Yep. So you think it's a plan, or you think it's just stupid?
No, this is who they are. They're arrogant sociopaths and psychopaths.
Gotcha. All right. Now.
John Wells, I have to go now.
I know you do, but I don't want you to go without telling us about. Now, the website is Trends Research, right? It used to be Trends Journal, or are both of those websites still active and go to the same place?
Well, they go to the same place, but trendsresearch.com. And not only the Trends Journal, the top trends for 2017, we do a trend monthly, trend alert each week. Each weekday night, Trends in the News broadcasts, and it's only $99 a year, and that's for the digital, and we put out a magazine as well. But what we're saying is that we know people are having financial difficulties, so there's a discount request page.
All
Try
right.
to make the Trends Journal available to everyone.
Gerald Celente, I hope you don't mind my saying this, but you're the brother I never had. God bless you, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And as we were talking earlier, I said, you're smoking cigarettes. And he said, yeah, and I'm not going to, basically he said, I'm not going to listen to anybody tell me that I shouldn't or can't. And I told him that I'm suspicious of people who don't drink or smoke or something. Because there's something creepy about people who don't have any vices whatsoever. It makes me uncomfortable. Now you can take that. That's a little tongue-in-cheek for you. He's a heck of an author. I'm not kidding you. And the best way to find out his extensive list of books is to go to his website, which is GizaDeathStar.com, which we both agree is a very friendly name for a website. Giza Death Star. But among others, he has written, let's see, I got a lot of pages here. Okay, the Giza Death Star. The Giza Death Star deployed. Reich of the Black Sun. Giza Death Star destroyed. The SS Brotherhood of the Bell. That must be about Die Glocke. Mm-hmm. The Cosmic War. Secrets of the Unified Field. The Philosopher's Stone. The Nazi International. We've talked with him on the program about that one before. Babylon's Banksters, Roswell and the Reich, LBJ and the Conspiracy to Kill Kennedy. Talked to him about that, too. Genes, Giants, Monsters, and Men, The Grid of the Gods with Dr. Scott D. DeHart. Saucers, Swastikas, and Psyops. Yahweh, the Two-Faced God, Theology, Terrorism, and Topology with Dr. Scott D. DeHart. That's Amazon Kindle ebook. Transhumanism, a grimoire of alchemical altars and agendas for the transformation of man, also with Dr. Scott D. DeHart. And recently, this year, he released, in April of this year, Hidden Finance, Rogue and Secret Sorcery, The Fascist International, and 9/11. And that's just the title of one book. And the other one is Rotten to the Common Core. I like it already, from July of this year. And so, if you don't know Joseph Farrell, you will now. Welcome back, Joseph. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me back on, John. Pleasure to be here.
Say, what do you make of this election? Me too.
Well, look, I'm glad it's over. John, I viewed this election more as a referendum than a standard election. Yep. It was clear that what we were facing was more of the same under Darth Hillary, as I like to call it.
Darth Hillary, wow.
And at least a chance of rolling back this unipolar globalist agenda that we've been living under, for so long. I saw a political cartoon that kind of summed it up for me. It was a cartoon where the American people were forced to play a game of Russian roulette, and the Hillary Clinton revolver had the magazine completely full, and the Donald Trump revolver had the magazine only half full. So, that's kind of the way I felt. It really was, to me, kind of a referendum, very much like the Brexit vote. There's this rising tide, I think, around the world, particularly in North America and Europe, to a lesser extent elsewhere, against this global-only agenda that we've seen that the elites are trying to put into place for the past 30 years. And time will tell whether or not Mr. Trump is able to make good on some of his campaign pledges and statements. But from the looks of things so far, I think it's very interesting to look at some of his cabinet selections. I just did an interview with Catherine Fitz not too long ago discussing some of these, and we basically came to the conclusion that there's two ways you can take his appointments. And there's really no middle ground between these two interpretations. One interpretation would be simply that, well, we're in for more of the same, which I don't think is the case. I think what you're looking at with Mr. Trump is he's putting together literally a team or a machine, if you will, to move a lot of that money that's been hiding in offshore accounts, corporate accounts, and so on, and bring all of that money back to North America, to reshore it, in other words, and get the economy going with manufacturer stimulation, infrastructure projects, and so on, and to make things viable again for the middle class. That's the way it looks, at least to us. But again, time is going to tell. But I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, I am too. It was pretty weird. And you know what I thought was really strange? We just spoke with Gerald Celente a while ago, and I mentioned this to him, but on the Android mobile devices powered by Google, right? If you typed in the name Trump into a text message or something, the predictive words that came up were assassinated and dies. I'm serious about this. I saw this with my own two eyes. Now, if you did that on an iPhone, that did not happen, but it happened consistently on Android platform phones. And
yeah, well, there's no doubt that the global elitists, the globalonists, as I like to call them, are very, very unhappy with Mr. Trump's election. I said all along, and this goes back for some time, a couple of years ago when it looked like he might run, that his candidacy was not the lark that it appeared to be. From my point of view, I think he represents a segment of the American deep state that has looked at the direction that the neoconservatives have taken things for the past 30 or so years, and particularly since 9/11. And they were, to be very blunt, pissed off with the way things were going. And I think you're seeing this now in the internecine fights between the military and some of the finance people he's brought on board, Tillerson, for example, between that group of the American deep state and the CIA, Clinton Foundation, Soros, that group. Basically, you're looking at, I think, at a conflict between finance capital and equity capital. And Trump, of course, representing the latter. And, for me, it was kind of hinted by the fact that Trump makes much of his money in real estate and casinos. And if you're the mafia, you've seen the decline of Las Vegas under Obama, particularly with Obamacare, because people don't have the discretionary leisure spending money that they had prior to that point. And so it's cut into their bottom line. So the way I looked at it, Trump is representing a deeply pissed off segment of the American deep state that is watching its bottom line being cut into, and his solution is, from the sounds of it so far, his solution is to bring things back to the shores and to revitalize the economy, revitalize the middle class, and get things going again. So he represents kind of an equity capital versus finance capital faction, I think. So anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but that's kind of the way that I've been looking at things so far. Again, time will tell whether or not any of this is true.
Well, you didn't cut me off at all, and you're welcome to do that at any time. I'm not the guy that stands between another guy and a good idea or something salient he has to bring to the program. I'm wondering how dangerous it would be to write a book about George Soros. I think people, I don't think everybody understands, or necessarily that, certainly everybody doesn't understand, that there are some places where George W. Bush, George Soros, they dare not land their planes there. They'll be promptly placed under arrest if they do. So it's not all a gravy train ride with these guys. They've had their time, and now Soros hasn't moved off the main sequence just yet. I notice that these evil people like Soros and Castro and Mandela, these bastards just won't die.
Right.
They just live forever.
Yeah, well, I've seen stories out there, John, on the internet that these people have been taking transfusions of blood of young people. I read a story recently I think a couple of weeks ago, where David Rockefeller, 101 or 102 years old, has just had his 7th heart transplant. So, yeah, these people are doing something unnatural, or they have access to a kind of medicine that's, not public access or something. But, these people seem to live forever. There's no doubt in my mind that people like Soros are capable of almost any sort of evil. I mean, this is a man that boasted about his collaboration with the Nazis. So, nothing surprises me anymore about these people. Nothing at all.
Joseph, how do you combine philosophy and psychology? Philopsychologically speaking, how is it that people have a problem with, for example, Mr. Tillerman, the CEO of ExxonMobil, working in the Trump cabinet, and they're afraid, these weenies are so afraid because he did business with the Russians, and yet they have no problems whatsoever with George Soros being effectively a former Nazi, a non-practicing Jew who helped no-kidding Nazis and soldiers, not necessarily members of the Nazi Party, but absolutely members of the Wehrmacht, the German army, load up the property of his Jewish neighbors, and in some cases, his Jewish neighbors themselves. And yet nobody says a thing about this. How can you account for this selective denial?
I really can't, other than, John, I view much of the progressive left as a kind of a cult. It's really a religion, not a political ideology. And, they view themselves as above the law. You mentioned Soros and the Nazis. Well, look at Hillary Clinton and the Saudis and all of the deals that were made through the Clinton Foundation. So it's very, very selective. There's been a demonization of Russia by these people. I suspect in large part due to the fact that, first of all, you have some sort of crypto fascist influence on their thinking, because Russia at the time under the communists was the sworn enemy of the Nazis. So I think there's a little bit of that in play. But the other thing is, Russia, ever since Putin assumed the presidency over there, Russia's been involved on an experiment that I like to call the experiment in being the first postmodern state. In other words, Russia is making a deliberate return to its Orthodox cultural roots under Putin. And you see this very clearly symbolized in the fact that you have the Romanov eagle prominently displayed on many versions of the Russian flag. Putin himself associates himself with this. He attends Russian Orthodox church services and so on. So you see an attempt of the Russian state, I think, to create something new in modern history, and that's a secular state that, by the same token, is not going to turn its back on its cultural and religious roots. And the globalists hate this. They hate anything that gives any sort of credence to Christianity and its influence on the evolution of our culture. And Russia, certainly is a part of that wider culture in that sense. So I think that's part of it. You had the Swedish Interior Minister or something just this last year come out and say, well, the real enemy of globalism is orthodoxy. So it's on their target list. For people like Soros and the people that have this hypocritical double standard, I really can't explain it other than that this is their religion, and anything that flies in the face of their dogma is to be denounced. That's the only way I can see this.
Wow, a secular state that doesn't turn its backs on its
right
historical reference to its theology and its customs.
Right.
On the face of it, I can't see anything wrong with that kind of a move. Not a thing.
Well, I don't either. But, the West has attempted to demonize Russia. We had the Pussy Riot thing, remember, back a couple years ago, where you had this punk rock band go into an Orthodox church during their mass, during their liturgy, and attempt to disrupt the services. Well, Putin put a stop to that and threw him in jail. And this was roundly denounced, of course, in the Western press as, oppression of free speech and so on and so forth. It was nothing of the kind. It was just insisting that there are certain boundaries and common courtesies that you extend to people. And this experiment in a postmodern state, people in this country really need to become aware of some of the advisors around President Putin, people like Alexander Dugin, who have basically kind of fleshed out the philosophy, the political philosophy that Russia is attempting to follow. So it's a case of partially the West not being willing to understand what's going on there. But Tillerson, you mentioned Tillerson, and this goes back to what we talked about prior to the connection problems. There's a certain amount of hysteria regarding some of Trump's appointments, and people are looking at this as business as usual. Well, I don't look at Tillerson particularly as that at all. I think it's a very smart move on Trump's part to have someone in there that, first of all, isn't just giving you the knee-jerk reaction that Putin is behind everything evil in the world. Hacking the American elections, which I think is an absurdity on the face of it. Russia has nothing to gain from hacking American elections, and if they did, they wouldn't do it so sloppily. So Tillerson, being a friend of Putin, is someone that you would want to have in there because, as Mr. Trump pointed out during the campaign, there are a lot of areas where American and Russian interests overlap. And there are areas that we could even cooperate in, such as, the war on terrorism, ISIS, and so on. So having someone like Tillerson in there makes a great deal of sense just from that standpoint alone. And the other thing, as I said before we had the connection problems, I think the reason that the left is so hysterical is that they see him assembling a team to do precisely what he promised to do. And that is reshore the capital, reshore the manufacturing base of this country, which from a military standpoint alone makes a lot of sense. If you look at the Russian chain of supply, if you look at Russian logistics, everything that they field operationally in terms of military equipment is made in Russia by Russian companies and by Russians, whereas the American military is relying upon this part made here, that part made there. Oftentimes those parts themselves are so farmed out that they can be counterfeited and subject to breakdown, penetration, and so on. So just from a military standpoint, reshoring things makes a lot of sense in the Trump administration. And I think this is why you see a lot of the military lining up behind him, because they understand that we can't have a functioning military if our logistical supply chain is farmed out all over the world. It just doesn't make sense. So there's a lot going on here. The left, I think, is just being hypocritical. This is their religion, and anything challenging that dogma is to be denounced. And they're going to lose if they keep playing that game.
Yeah, so it seems, and this indoctrination that's been, I've been calling him Tillerman, Rex Tillerman. It's not Tillerman. I'm sorry about that, folks. It's Tillerson. Okay.
Yeah, Tillerson.
But then again, I was referring to the DNA scientist as James Watt. I think he was involved in electricity. It was James Watson I was thinking of. So I promise I'll tighten it up a little bit, but at least I'll correct my errors as I go along here. Now, the indoctrination is taking place starting at about, age 5, 6 years old, and then we go on to the university level. Why don't we, and we've seen what's happened there. Somebody actually had about 1,000 people found the, shall I say, the testicular and ovarian fortitude to totally rebel against this insane teacher of human sexuality at a college out in Cali. And just effectively ran her off and said, you can take your communism somewhere else. They were saying everything from bullet in the face to get out of here to you're insane, you're a nutcase, and all this other stuff. And she actually fled the state for a while and is expected to return to her class in January. Mm-hmm. So it looks like the students are beginning to push back. And the objection was not that she was espousing her political views and her opinions. It was that she was doing it within the context of the classroom. She's not in there to teach that kind of stuff. It was just more left-wing propaganda. So why don't we get into this about your book that came out this past July, Rotten to the Common Core? How did we even wind up with Common Core? And you just take it away.
Well, we wound up with it, John, from a long process of instilling progressivist values and philosophy in American education. This began in the late 19th century. So in other words, it's been going on for a long time. And there's two core things to bear in mind here. When you look at people like James Bryan Conant, the former president of Harvard University, when you look at people like Henry Chauncey, the founder of the Educational Testing Service, back after World War II, and remember, this was getting underway in the late 19th century, but after World War II, they conceived the idea of having a national system to identify gifted students and slot them into the major universities. Conant created the Harvard Scholarships to offer scholarships, free rides essentially, to people that were so identified. And the way that they did this was, of course, through the standardized test. The problem that I and my co-author in Rotten to the Common Core have is not so much with the idea that there is a core standard of things that you must learn to be competent in a particular discipline. I mean, this is as old as the Greek academies. You know, this is something that's been around for millennia. That's not the problem with Common Core. The problem with Common Core is the assessment process, because what you have is now the standardized test on steroids. So let's look at, first of all, the basic standardized test, and then look at what they're planning to do with Common Core. In the basic standardized test, you are not required to explain your process of reasoning for selecting certain answers. In fact, you're simply given certain answers, and you mark in, you know, with your number 2 lead pencil, you fill in the oval or you fill in the slot, being careful not to go outside the line. So let's imagine a standardized test, which is essentially an obedience test. Are you loyal to the narrative that they feed you or not? The standardized test, therefore, does not test your reasoning ability. There's no human answer. You are put in the position, no human interaction, I should say. You are put in the position of having to guess what's in the mind of the anonymous test makers themselves. So let me give you an example. Can you imagine on a standardized test a question like the following? Who killed John F. Kennedy? Lee Harvey Oswald, Jack Ruby, a conspiracy consisting of Cubans, and so on and so forth. Well, we all know that the Warren Commission narrative is going to appear and be enshrined in the standardized test questions. Any alternative views are not, and you are not allowed to explain your answer. This is the problem. We cited in the book the case of a student for a National Merit Scholarship that took one of these standardized tests in which the word intentionally was misspelled. And of course, you had to identify the misspelled word. And the misspelled word was spelled with an S rather than a T, Tionally. Well, the student was particularly bright and knew that the spelling of the word intentionally with an S-I-O-N was part of the logical and linguistic philosophy of the philosopher Hayakawa, who used it and spelled it that way with a specific meaning in mind. And of course, the test makers didn't know that. So he had to guess. Did they either know this or not know this? And of course, he guessed wrongly. He submitted it to a friend of Albert Einstein, a mathematician by the name of Banish Hoffman, who published a marvelous little book about the problem with standardized tests. And his problem was precisely that encountered by this student. And I remember these standardized tests and thinking the same thing, because the student was smarter than the test makers. This is the problem. And what the standardized test therefore really does is it punishes the student with the finer mind. Another example, back in the 60s, there was a question on one of these standardized tests: the emperor is the name of what? And then it had 3 answers for you: a concerto, a string quartet, or none of the above. And of course, most people that are familiar with classical music would think, well, Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 5, the Emperor Concerto. But Haydn wrote a string quartet that's also called the Emperor. And of course, the test makers didn't know that. So once again, if you're a student that's thoroughly familiar with classical music, I ran into questions like this all the time. And I grew up, playing pipe organ. I was very familiar with classical music. I remember tests like this all the time. They were punishing students that knew more than the test makers. So that's what happens in the standardized test. You're really creating a loyalty test. Do you buy the official narratives and history and so on and so forth? You're not allowed to explain your process of reasoning. So in other words, the standardized test is really simply a loyalty test. Are you regurgitating the answers that you're spoon-fed? Now, let's go to Common Core. In the Common Core assessment process, you not only have a standardized test, but the test is now individually adaptable, so that the test questions will change student by student depending on the answers that the student gives to a previous question. So in other words, you're not only put in the position of having to guess what the anonymous test makers decide is the correct answer, but now you're also playing a mind game with a panel of psychologists, again, anonymous, that are going to create tailor-made questions just for you. And the real problem and bottom line here is those test questions remain the proprietary information of the corporations that prepare the tests. So parents, teachers, school boards are taken out of the loop of what appears on those tests and have access to the questions. You're basically now reducing the teacher in the classroom, and this is I think their stated goal. You're reducing the teacher to a proctor of an examination. I had, John, an encounter about 3 months ago with a teacher in a public school system who resigned, and she told me that part of the Common Core system is that she was not allowed to design her own lesson plan. She had to follow a pre-established lesson plan and be at such and such a point by such and such a time in her teaching in order to have the students take the test and go on to the next level. So in other words, she lost all control of the local situation that she was in. This is insanity. You cannot teach this way. And the only thing that this is going to result in is more money for the big corporations preparing their tests and preparing their textbooks and feeding at the government trough. That's the only thing this is. This is a big social engineering experiment, just like James Bryant Conant and Henry Chauncey first envisioned it after World War II. It's a big social engineering experiment designed to slot people into the jobs and futures and careers that they, on the basis of their standardized tests, think that they should be slotted into. And mark my words, what will come out of this, if this is allowed to go forward, is a system of rewards and punishments if you follow some other career choice for your life other than that indicated by their tests. This is draconian. This is 1984. This is an assault on teachers, on the freedom that they should have in the classroom to present the curriculum in the manner that they think is best for their students. After all, they're the ones in human contact with their students, not some corporate board, not some anonymous committee of experts in Princeton or Harvard or wherever.
Oh boy. Now, I think we're all in agreement that the Department of Education needs to go away completely and get the feds out of the schools. Get the feds out of. Why don't we just get the feds out of just about everything?
Everything, yeah. I would say not only that, but there's another problem that emerged, John, early on in the progressive movement in education, and that's teacher certification. And the reason why is if you go back and examine the way American education was cobbled together by these people, many of them studied under a German psychologist by the name of Wilhelm Wundt at the University of Leipzig in Germany back in the 19th century. Well, Wundt had the idea that psychology had to be put on a scientific footing, and that meant that everything had to be statistically measurable. It was Wundt that trained Pavlov, and we all know about Pavlov's dogs, you know. So Wundt created a system of education, basically, where the teacher was basically a licensed practitioner to apply the latest psychological and educational theories in the classroom. This is why teacher certification got started. They're essentially like nurse practitioners in medicine. They're licensed to do certain things that a professional doctor would do, or in this case, a professional psychologist or psychiatrist would do in the classroom. And what this did in turn is it took the focus off of the content of the curriculum and put the focus on methodology. All right? The teacher's there to design suitable learning experiences in the classroom. So if you really want to fix education in this country, I would say get rid of teacher certification. I am forbidden, John, by this system, having a PhD from the oldest university in the English-speaking world, from stepping into a public school classroom with that degree alone. I still have to go through the certification process and learn all of their Mickey Mouse educational theories and pedagogy and methodology and all of this claptrap. If I were to teach history, let's say, at a high school level. In other words, an academic degree is not good enough. You have to have a degree in all of this other stuff. And I can tell you, this is what's choking American education. It's the focus on method rather than content. And method, again, cannot be taught in a cut and paste, one size fits all, for the simple reason that people are different. This is why you have teachers in the classroom. They all know that they have to tailor their presentations based on the students that they get. So, I would say not only abolish the Federal Department of Education, just get rid of this whole idea of certification. You should be hired solely on the basis of your competence in the discipline that you have your academic degree in, rather than your competence in applying the latest theory, which changes every 2 years. So it's a constant. The system has been designed, John, to set up the teacher for constant failure. And then that means, well, we have to apply more of these theories and have more federal money and so on and so forth. Just get rid of the whole thing. The whole thing needs to be scrapped, top to bottom. I'm in full agreement with you there, and I'm in full agreement with John Taylor Gatto and other famous American teachers that have basically said the same thing. The whole system has to go.
Yeah, I mean, how hard can this be? It's monstrous what's happening to these kids. They're graduating. They're graduating, but they don't know anything. They don't know nothing.
Anything, and they have senses of entitlement, of privilege. They're little snowflakes that have to have their safe spaces and be protected from certain kinds of speech and so on and so forth. Well, this is the opposite of education. This is indoctrination. This is creating a kind of secular religion where you're not able to question anything. And again, the standardized test reinforces that. You're given a pre-selected set of answers rather than being required, and here's the key point, rather than being required to generate your own answers and argue for them. So that's not education at all. Even in mathematics, you take these standardized tests and they're just asking you to fill out the correct answer, but they're not asking you to show how you got it. Well, in mathematics, that's 90% of the problem is how to derive the correct answer and show it and prove it. So none of this system is really set up, as far as I'm concerned, to demonstrate any sort of education or academic standard whatsoever. It's all a big loyalty test.
Outcome-based education and no child left behind.
Left behind, right. And when you start saying things like that, John, what you're really doing is you're putting into a system where the teacher's not teaching at their level and trying to bring students up to it. They're teaching to the lowest common denominator in the class.
Absolutely. Well said. That's absolutely true. I wonder if this can be undone. And and here's the other part. If we do manage to dismantle this horrible system, what about the people who were graduated before this system was dismantled? What do we do with them?
Well, I think what you're first of all going to see is the more they go ahead with this system, the more you're going to create a kind of a black market or an underground educational system. This is already happening to a certain extent. Guess where? In Silicon Valley. And what do the rich people in Silicon Valley do? Well, they send their kids off to private schools where, guess what? They have no computers in the classroom.
That's right. I've heard about this before. I've heard of this. Yeah. Please elaborate. This is excellent.
Well, they understand that learning is a human process. It's not a mechanizable process, and it never was and never will be. So what I'm seeing happen ultimately is the more they go ahead with this, the more people are going to take their kids out of these public schools altogether, or they're going to educate subversively. They're going to sit their kids down at home and say, well, this is what your school is saying, but here's the facts, all right? And you're going to create a two-track system, essentially. And it's already taking place. I talk to many teachers who are already telling me, well, yeah, Common Core is being shoved down my throat, and I'm going ahead and teaching as much of my own lesson plans as I am able to do within the system. All right, so you're creating a two-track system, and it's going to lead ultimately, I think, to a black market in education, where parents increasingly are going to be seeking out, if they pull their kids out of these schools, they're going to be seeking out tutors, and I can guarantee you that in such a market, if you have a degree in education, that's going to be the first red flag that parents are going to say, no, I'm not hiring you. I want my kid to learn Latin and Greek, or I want my kid to learn algebra or biology or whatever, with people that have a certain competence in those fields rather than a track record of having kowtowed to the latest educational theory coming out of the Columbia Teachers School. So this, I think, is what you're going to see happen. Once that starts to happen, once you have that, so to speak, populist revolt, then you're going to see pressure being put on local and state and the federal government to just scrap this whole thing altogether. It has produced a bumper crop of snowflakes, of whiny, entitled people. Quit sending your kids to these colleges and universities that this stuff is tolerated. Kudos to the University of Chicago for just coming right out and saying that, there's no safe spaces here. You will not be protected from triggering language and all of that stuff. They intend to keep an academic institution. So the bottom line here, parents are going to have to exercise responsibility with their kids and quit sending them, once they get to college level, quit sending them to these schools that are nothing but indoctrination centers. And that means a lot of the big name schools, which are surviving on their reputations, are just going to start having to feel the crunch of the pocketbook, because parents have to start sending their kids to colleges where none of this is tolerated or accepted. And there are a lot out there.
So as this guy who thinks he's got a brain cell or two likes to say, his name's Wells, that's it. If you want something to go away, quit bleeping buying it, and it will go away.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
You know what's amazing to me, Joseph? I mentioned James Watson a while ago. Mm-hmm. University of Chicago, he said when he put his Nobel Prize up for sale, and he said he intended to make some contributions because all he said was, there's no universal law. I'm paraphrasing him, but this was the message. There's no law out there that says that people who are separated by long distances, okay, landmass, ocean, whatever you got, there's nothing that says that we all evolved at the same pace. And if you continue to apply European solutions to African problems, you're not going to make it. They're not on the same page with you. They don't think like you do. None of it. Forget it. Oh, God, racist, bigot, everything. I mean, just absolutely ran him out of town on a rail, But isn't it funny that the University of Chicago was an institution that he said looked after him and kind of took care of him, while the whole rest of the world shunned him. And then, I had forgotten about that, and I don't remember. Wasn't it the University of Chicago, the dean up there, one of them, that said no safe spaces here? Yeah,
it was the University of Chicago, and there's a few other universities saying the same thing. So again, if you are thinking that Harvard or Oxford or Stanford or Princeton are the places you want to send your kids, well, these big name universities are essentially nothing but indoctrination centers now, and they're indoctrination centers by and large for the progressive left, because again, this progressivist movement in education began in the late 19th century, so it's had a long time to work itself into the American university system, and therefore you have to get rid of the idea that a big name university is automatically the best. As a matter of fact, I think the soundest academic education is probably being done right now in colleges and universities that don't have big names, because they're not going to put up with this stuff. I'm thinking of St. John's College in this country, a wonderful interdisciplinary liberal arts study, primary text sort of university, and even it's coming under assault from these progressivists. And, people are just going to have to start doing what you say. Quit buying it if the product doesn't suit your values or your understanding of education. Just quit buying their product to the extent that you are able. And if necessary, even send your kids overseas if you can't find an American college that suits you. But pull out of this system. Quit funding it. We do have that option, and it's going to have to be pursued. And if you have the money and can afford it and have private tutors for your kids, by all means, put an ad in the local paper seeking people with competence in the following subjects, no education degree. Just make it very clear that this whole system is what you are opposed to.
Two names were left off that list: Harvard and Yale.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You talk about indoctrination centers, but it's almost like, okay, if you want to help rule the world along with the rest of the global elite, you need to get your degree here.
Exactly. Well, we need to remember that this is what these universities were set up for. They were set up, and again, I'm going back to what James Bryant Conant was saying in his lectures and writings after World War II, that this is precisely what they wanted to do. They wanted to have an aristocracy of merit, and this is what their game plan was. The university and the educational system were big social engineering, not only experiments, but mechanisms to create a political class, indoctrinate them for leadership. And, this again is not the purpose of a university. And to a certain extent, the Oxbridge universities in Great Britain functioned the same way, beginning, let's say, from Queen Elizabeth all the way up till now. They functioned as the places where the political class, where the leadership class was cultivated. They managed to keep up until very recently some of their academic standing, but this is the way they view these universities. Well, this ultimately is again short-circuiting the process. You can't have a leadership class that cannot think outside of its own box. This is why the global elite right now is panicking with the Brexit and panicking with the populist revolts in Europe and the Trump phenomenon in this country, because they're dealing with people that, number one, they do not understand. They literally don't understand. So if you're the global elite and you've surrounded yourself with yes men that agree with everything that you think, you're incapable of thinking outside of your own box. Let me give you an example that we cite from the book. That we cite in the book. Shortly after, I think, 1930, there was a fellow, a progressivist educator in this country by the name of Abraham Flexner, that wanted to test his progressive theories of education. And so he started what he called the Lincoln School, dress it up with a nice patriotic name. And John D. Rockefeller sent his sons, Lawrence, Nelson Aldrich, and David, to this school. And as a result of going to a school where the emphasis was on socialization rather than learning academic content, you have Lawrence and Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller complaining that they don't like to read. They find it tedious and difficult. Well, that's quite a statement right there, because this is really an admission that these so-called leaders really weren't all that smart if they couldn't open up a book and take some pleasure and derive some learning from a book. This is a huge admission. And to me, it's a kind of a confirmation of the idea that when you're the global elite and you surround yourself with people that think exactly like you do, you can't think outside of your own box. And when your playbook is no longer relevant, then what do? Well, you resort to panic and you resort to force like we see now because they can't think in any other way.
This is really sobering stuff.
It's very sobering. It's very sobering when you stop and think that we might be dealing with a leadership class that's fundamentally stupid.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
It doesn't sound good. John, let me give you another example. Turn the clock back to JFK and to RFK. I remember when Martin Luther King was assassinated, that Senator Robert Kennedy, I think was in Indianapolis, I think it was at the time, and he had to go in front of a crowd of predominantly black people in Indianapolis that had turned out at one of his political rallies and announce the death of Dr. King. And when he did so, this was completely extempore. When he did so, you could hear his voice cracking, you could hear how upset he was, and he went on to quote a poem of Aeschylus from memory to share with the crowd. Now, stop and compare that to our current political class, be it Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, whoever, Bernie Sanders. Imagine any of them having the literacy to do that, and they don't. So we're in the hands of fundamentally illiterate, stupid people that are products of the very same system that we've been talking about.
You know what? I got to tell you, Dr. Joe, that is the best way I have ever heard the problem stated. It is absolutely X-ring, 5 shots through the same hole, right in the X. Yep. I'm telling you, that was a brilliant comment. Sorry, but
no,
I mean, seriously.
It's just the measure of how far we've fallen. That we had people at one time in this country that were capable of literate, exalted speech to convey their points, that didn't have to resort to the F-bomb or the S-bomb in order to emphasize a point.
And the people understood them.
That crowd that Senator Kennedy addressed was silent and understood everything that he was saying. And now, look at us. You know, there's movements in this country, John, that I'm very, very not only skeptical of, but actually frightened of, for some sort of constitutional convention. And, you know, I'm adamantly against it for the very simple reason that would we want to turn over that process to a so-called elite that is stupid?
What a bad idea.
That's a very bad idea. It's a very bad idea. So, yeah, you know, we have fallen that far, and it's due to the influence of this horrible progressivist philosophy that has weeded itself into education and taken the focus off of learning content to the focus on methodology and the latest educational theory or bauble or claptrap to come out of the teachers' schools with these self-appointed psychologists. And, you know, this is the problem.
Wow, I'm just sort of reveling in your commentary for a minute. I mean, I'll move the program along here, but yeah, you know, it's hard to believe. I mean, I did believe it, but, you know, you have all these little expressions like, well, if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. Or if I hadn't believed it, I wouldn't have seen it.
Right.
But, you know, in this case, I've experienced both. I suspected that there was a huge cadre of really either stupid or totally evil people that were running things, or that it was all somehow by design because they're actually not stupid, they're brilliant. Sort of like when George Bush began stuttering toward the end of his second term and sounded like a moron, and yet you hear him now, he doesn't sound like a moron at all. It's almost as though it was a contrived act of some sort. I can't imagine the man would just belittle like that. And then his wife made that ridiculous speech talking about George went out to milk a horse, and it was a male horse. And everybody laughed. I mean, start all this self-deprecating nonsense that was on a sub-juvenile level, and I didn't buy any of it. I thought it was totally phony.
Well, the elite, as far as I'm concerned, particularly in this country, I think, number one, they're fundamentally stupid. Number two, many of them are fundamentally evil. And yeah, I do think they're following some sort of plan, but it's not necessarily a brilliant plan, but rather a cunning one. These people don't want to have their stupidity unmasked. And when it is unmasked, you see just exactly how bad things are. I mean, President Obama, when he's talking off a teleprompter, talks just fine. But get him to respond off the top of his head, and he can't do it. This was Hillary Clinton. I mean, look at the last campaign. Say what you will about the over-the-top rhetoric sometimes of Donald Trump. He had an ability that she did not, and that was the ability to think on his feet. And she couldn't do it because she cannot get outside of her own box long enough to understand any other point of view. And this is the fundamental problem that we have not only with the elites, but with education. Education is supposed to expose you to a realm of ideas, and you are supposed to be able to argue your response to them. But you're not required to argue anymore. And this is the problem. So we now have a generation of snowflakes that feel entitled, that have their beliefs, and you dare not challenge them, or they holler all sorts of ad hominems at you: racist, xenophobe, misogynist, misandry, all of this stuff that has absolutely no place in argument because they've never learned argument. That's the problem.
Oh man! All right. Well, I think this is a really handy place to. Before I go there, though, several people we've considered doing a program on Skull and Bones, and a number of people have said that's a really bad idea. So, in that case, I really want to do it. Are you into that? Have you done much research on that outfit?
I've done a little. There are a few books on it. Anthony Sutton's book, America's Secret Establishment, being probably the textbook on Skull and Bones. There have been a number of other books recently to have examined it. But I don't think any idea is a bad idea. This again, what ideas are forbidden? We're supposed to be in a country where there's free speech.
Yeah.
So, as far as I'm concerned, any question is fair game so long as you can argue your case. We've got to get out of this idea that some ideas are so to speak, fake news. They're not. This is again an attempt to disqualify certain types of inquiry, and once we start doing that, then progress stops. There's no such thing as forbidden ideas. There may be bad ideas upon examination. That's a different question, because the qualifier there is examination. Well, let's look at this. Is this true or is this not true? But you have to have the freedom to do so, and that's what they're trying to shut down.
All right, then. Why don't we just segue into hidden finance, rogue and secret sorcery, the Fascist International, and 9/11.
Yeah, the title of that book is actually Hidden Finance, Rogue Networks, and Secret Sorcery.
Oh, gotcha. Rogue Networks. I left out a word.
Yeah, Rogue Networks.
Even better.
That's my so-called 9/11 book. And it's a difficult book to try and summarize, but basically my approach to 9/11, John, and this was a thought that I had on the day of 9/11 itself. It struck me then, watching the events unfold, that not only was this a kind of false flag, that there was some rogue network within the American deep state that had either allowed it to happen or actually planned it. And I think now the case is, if you look at the 9/11 truth movement, it began with the idea of a rogue network that allowed it to happen. And then as more and more things were uncovered by those researchers, it moved more into a made it happen sort of scenario. But as I was looking at the events of 9/11, I thought, okay, well, there's evidently two levels here at least. You have the patsies, the people flying the airplanes, and then you have everything going on behind it to coordinate it, which indicates a rogue network. But I had the thought at the time that we might be looking at a penetrated operation at the second level. In other words, that there was a third level involved that revealed itself to the planners of the second level and more or less pinned them on that day. And when you look at 9/11 and some of the statements that were made immediately prior to it and then immediately afterward, you get some very interesting things. For example, Prime Minister Tony Blair, after 9/11, stated that Al-Qaeda was really part of a global network, but he never specified what that global network was, nor who was behind it. But prior to 9/11, and this was uncovered by our good friend Jim Marrs, prior to 9/11, there was a Russian economist by the name of Dr. Tatiana Koryagina, who published, I think it was in July of 2001, so a couple months before, published in Pravda an article where she maintained that the United States would suffer some sort of catastrophic attack against significant symbols of American power on its own soil. And she went on to state that this attack would be staged, and here it comes, by a global network of a very few men with assets of in excess of $300 trillion, and that the attacks would be designed to reshape the world according to their own designs. So in other words, again, she's pointing to the existence of a non-state actor of international extent and deep, deep pockets. So again, I'm thinking, all right, there's a third level here that goes beyond even some rogue network within the American military-industrial community or complex. So I started digging, and I found two whoppers that I published in the book that to this day have my jaw on the floor. Let's look at Mohammed Atta.
All right.
And I began the book with Mohammed Atta.
And just bring everybody up to speed about who he is and what part he played, allegedly or otherwise.
Mohammed Atta allegedly was the chief hijacker. He was the one that, according to the official narrative, took that flight from Boston to Portland, Maine, where they apparently rented a car or drove from Boston to Portland, Maine in a rented car, got on a connecting flight from Portland back to Boston, and then got on the American Airlines flight that crashed into the North Tower, the first crash into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And conveniently, Mohammed Atta left a bunch of evidence in the trunk to suggest that he was carrying this out as some sort of Islamic terrorist operation. All right? But when you look at Mohammed Atta, this guy is truly stranger than the worst Hollywood B movie could possibly be. Because, first of all, he entered this country coming from Hamburg, Germany, and that right there sets off a red flag, because there was another Mohammed Atta that was responsible for the Israeli school bus bombing back in the 1980s, okay? So in other words, the name itself would have been put on a national watch list It would have been put on a red flag for anyone coming into the country with that name would have been flagged at customs. And yet he gets in smoothly, all right? He then attends this Venice, Florida flight school that is run by a Dutchman, all right, Rudy Deckers. And he's coming again from Hamburg, Germany. So you dig a little further. And Muhammad Atta had been, quote unquote, according to the story, recruited in Cairo, Egypt by two Germans whose names to this day are unknown. He then studies German at the University of Cairo, goes to Hamburg, where he lives in a middle-class neighborhood of Hamburg for a few years, apparently with this couple. But here's the kicker. When he's in Germany, he's sponsored by the Karl Duisberg Gesellschaft, the Karl Duisberg Society. And when I read that, John, that's when my jaw hit the floor. I said, you've got to be kidding. So who's Karl Duisberg? Well, turns out that Karl Duisberg was the CEO of Bayer during World War I, and he was one of the founding members and a member of the board of, guess who? IG Farben.
Bayer being the aspirin company.
Bayer being the big German chemicals company that makes aspirin.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
So he comes over to this country, and when he's over here, you know, you would think that this Islamic radical terrorist would be getting visits from lots of, you know, people from the Middle East. No. The people visiting him are people with names like Wolfgang, Peter, Hans, Jürgen, and they're all coming from Germany or Switzerland with suitcases of money and drugs and so on. Muhammad Atta is going up and down Florida visiting bars and strip joints and so on and so forth, you know, not living exactly the life of a Muslim fundamentalist, needless to say.
Right.
He speaks fluent German, he speaks French, he speaks Arabic, he even speaks Hebrew. So, you know, this was the first thing that made me think, okay, we've got a connection here to a German society. Supposedly, ostensibly, this society is for the promotion of educational opportunities for people from underdeveloped countries, okay? But if you look at the Karl Duisberg Society, people on the board have included such people as former Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, Henry Kissinger, Bill and Hillary Clinton, and on the list goes, okay? So in other words, there's something very peculiar here. Now, so I'm thinking immediately Nazi International, all right, which fills the bill of Tony Blair's international global organization. It fills the bill of Tatiana Koryagina's international group with lots of money in their pockets, all right, wanting to remake the world after their own designs. So I started digging a little more. I thought, well, this is interesting. It can't be merely coincidence that he's there. He's got that weird kind of tenuous connection to IG Farben. We also had, of course, the Deutsche Bank puts and shorts on the stock exchange prior to 9/11 through Krongard, all right, Alex Brown, and headed at that time by Krongard. So you have yet another German connection here. So I start digging around and dig into the bin Laden family, and this is what really floored me. The banker of choice that connected the bin Laden family to Deutsche Bank was a Swiss banker by the name of Francois Genoud, all right? And when I found that, again, my suspicion meter went right into the red zone. Because if you look at Francois Genoud, he was the banking agent, so to speak, for this post-war Nazi group in Switzerland. He controlled all of their accounts in Swiss banks. He was the funder of Otto Skorzény's late 1960s, early 1970s terrorist summits in Barcelona, Spain, that invited people like Yasser Arafat and people from the Muslim Brotherhood and so on and so forth. He was their financier. He was the fellow that controlled the financial estates of Joseph Goebbels and Adolf Hitler in post-war Swiss accounts. So in other words, this guy's literally the banker, so to speak, for the Nazi International, and he's the financial agent for the bin Laden family, and the one that talks them into putting a lot of their money into Deutsche Bank, all right? So in other words, we have yet another very, very fishy connection. So it looks to me just, and again, I'm giving you the Cliff Notes version of the book here. It looks to me as if there is some sort of international network, just as Blair and Koryagina indicated, and that network has these very, very suspicious fascist Nazi connections in it, and that's what's so frightening here. And the book is about a lot more than that. That's just kind of to get us started.
Okay. Yeah. Why is it none of this surprises me? I mean, it's very interesting information, but somehow I'm not surprised. I'm just more disgusted when it becomes clearer and clearer that whole thing was a complete setup. Now, was it simply to go into the Middle East and seize the oil? Because we didn't. I mean, what was the point? Or was it to throw us into the surveillance state?
Well, I think it was a bit of both. Again, if you've got three levels, if you've got a penetrated operation, in other words, if you're taking the standard 9/11 truth or line, that this operation was planned by a rogue network within the United States to create a new Pearl Harbor. And remember, President Bush used those very words in his post 9/11 addresses. So in other words, he was signaling message received. Okay. I think that at that level, yes, they were trying to create an operation designed to project American power into the Middle East, not just for oil, but for drugs, Afghanistan. All right. The pipeline story there, I think, is only half the story. But if you have a third level that has penetrated the second level, then what you've just done is you've executed a chess pin. You have to go through with your plan, but now you realize that you're dealing with a rogue network that has deeply penetrated the American government. And I think to a certain extent, the move toward a mass surveillance state is a consequence of that. Let's go back to 9/11 and look at what happens. I think Dr. Webster Tarpley here is entirely correct that there was a real potential for a coup that was taking place during 9/11. Why? Let's look at Bush's behavior, which so many have pointed out, but they're not looking at it, I think, in the right way. When Bush is at Booker Elementary School in Florida, he gives that first press conference there in which he states that he's going to get back on Air Force One, America's under attack, and he's flying directly back to Washington, D.C. So what happens? Well, he gets back to Air Force One, and Air Force One doesn't fly to Washington, D.C. It flies to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, and then from Barksdale, where he jettisons the press corps, he flies up to Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska. So something changes between the time he's at the school and the time the motorcade gets back to Air Force One. Now, it's even more significant, I think, that if you look at Bush's remarks at Barksdale in Louisiana, he makes no reference to terrorism at all. He said America's undergoing a test. Once he makes those remarks, he gets back on the plane, flies to Offutt. It's during that time period, and here I think Tarpley is exactly correct, it's during that time period that allegedly the White House switchboard was called. This story first broke, I think, in the Boston Globe. Switchboard was called by somebody that said Angel is next, using the code word, the commonly known code word for Air Force One, and then revealed their bona fides by revealing lots of top secret code names from almost every branch of the federal government: the FBI, the DEA, the DIA, the CIA, the NRO, the NSA, and so on and so forth. He had all of these, the scholar had all of these code names. And that's what signaled their bona fides, that they had access perhaps even to America's nuclear launch codes. So what does that mean? Well, Barksdale Air Force Base is the backup command center for all of America's strategic nuclear forces, and Offutt Air Force Base is, of course, the command center for it. So it's interesting that Bush is flying there. Why would he need to fly there? He would need to fly there if it was necessary to reassert personal presidential control over the command structure of the United States. And that is an indicator that that command structure had been deeply penetrated by somebody. So this is what I think goes on. It's only after Bush gets back from Offutt to Washington, D.C., that the terrorist narrative is restored. So I think that there was a potential coup attempt going on here, and that they were literally pinned to a course of action, that they were, to a certain extent, coerced into a course of action, that had they not had that happen, they may not have gone through with. The other thing, John, that kind of got me thinking along these lines was on 9/11 itself. I was watching the towers being hit and come down and listening to the news when they were already putting out the terrorist spin on the whole thing. And my thinking at that time was that, okay, if you want to create a false flag to project American power into the Middle East, it would have been sufficient to strike the Twin Towers alone to do that. Bringing them down was overkill to that agenda. So in other words, it's the very fact that they collapsed, and collapsed in such a weird way, that indicated to me, there may be a third player here that they weren't gambling on, because that action was overkill. So in other words, again, I think that if you look at the collapse in that way, and particularly the modalities of the collapse, that's where you get yet another clue that you're dealing with a third player. And what do I mean by that? The 9/11 Truth Movement has concentrated on 4 models of controlled demolition. And if you look at the advocates for these different models of controlled demolition, they hate each other. I don't know how else to put it. The advocates for conventional controlled demolition explosives hate the nanothermite people, hate the mini-nuke people, and certainly hate the directed exotic energy people, and vice versa. They're not talking to each other, in other words. But to me, what they're all doing is they're all focusing on the idea that there can be only one murder weapon, so to speak, and therefore only one murderer. But I think you're looking at kind of an Agatha Christie Murder on the Orient Express scenario, where at the end Hercule Poirot brings everybody in and points out that everyone stabbed that corpse or shot it or poisoned it long after it was actually dead. So everyone's committing the murder. There's different modalities of the murder and different players, therefore. So I think that if you look at the explanations for the tower's collapse, they all have their solid points and they all have their difficulties. And if you are assuming that there's just one murderer involved, then you're going to be forced into the position of defending one and only one modality of their collapse. But I think there's at least 2, if not more, and that's the reason you have so many different modalities and evidences for them on that day. You're dealing with an Agatha Christie Murder on the Orient Express. So in other words, it's not just 2 levels, patsies and a rogue network within the American deep state. There's at least 3 with a penetrated operation. So I hope that's making some sort of sense.
Well, it makes complete sense. It also spreads the blame out enough and simultaneously sort of dilutes responsibility and also adds confusion. So why not?
Well, it adds confusion. Yes, precisely. It adds confusion because the data of the mechanism of the tower's collapse has also been badly obfuscated, I think, and they were in a rush to get rid of the evidence anyway. So yeah, they're covering something up, and I don't think it's just the rogue networks. I think they're covering up the fact that there's another player that they don't want to admit. I've said all along that the war on terrorism, to me, looks like a convenient cover story for a war on something completely different, and that's this international fascist mafia, if you will, that has taken deep root in this country. And I think, again, going back to this election, we've seen now the pushback against that. So, yeah, this isn't over yet. I think this is all part of one big scenario. Very, very confusing one, but part of one big scenario.
Wow. Oh, boy, I'll tell you. You know, who do you think was the one who came up with this idea, or what department? I mean, can we trace this down to one person that said, I know what we need to do?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think, yes, you've got a rogue network within the American national security structure that plans this operation as a means of projecting American power. And if I were to look at one group or groups, I would say look at the covert operations desk within agencies like the CIA. Okay? I would look at their connections in turn to defense contractors, banks, and so on and so forth. That to me would be that second level that I think was penetrated by the third level. And if we are to look for who that third level is, this is why I think the mechanisms of the Twin Towers collapse is such a crucial question. Because it starts out with controlled demolitions as being the most obvious explanation for what we see, but then more evidence starts to come out, such as the presence of nanothermite residue on the remains of the World Trade Center. So that narrows your scope, because now you're not dealing just with the fact that you've got to prep the buildings. Now you're dealing with a much more sophisticated technology that's in the hands of fewer people. Even nanothermite, however, cannot explain another problem, and that's the continuing fires and radioactive traces that you will not find anywhere else other than in nuclear explosions. So that gave rise to the mini nukes theory of their collapse.
And that's a fact. There was radioactivity detected.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
Carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. But even that can't explain yet a fourth problem, and that's something that Dr. Judy Wood has pointed out very many times, that you have all of these strangely toasted cars all over lower Manhattan, in many cases some distance away from the actual World Trade Center itself, and you have a lot of paper residue that, if there were any mini nuke explosion, would have absolutely burned all of that paper, all right? So you have yet another problem that the mini nuke theory doesn't explain. And I've always maintained that the toasted cars would be a resonance phenomenon, a resonance effect of extremely high energy microwaves, most likely, or something in that range of the spectrum, that are causing resonance effects in certain parts of the car to melt and burn while the rest of the car remains, nice and pristine. There's a lot of these strange effects, but each one of these cases, you'll notice, does something. It's pointing the finger at a different group of people with access to different technologies. Obviously, by the time you get to mini nukes and any potential exotic energy weapon, you're dealing with a very narrow group of people, and by implication, you're not dealing with Muslim terrorists, okay? So the mechanism of the collapse, as far as I'm concerned, or mechanisms to be more precise, are pointing to different groups of people, different layers in the deeper structure of the event itself. And once we start entertaining that idea and then combine that with Mohammed Atta's very strange connections, with the bin Laden's family's very strange connections, all of these Nazi financiers and groups and so on and so forth, you're dealing, I think, precisely with that global network that Tony Blair talked about and that Dr. Tatiana Koryagina talked about.
Wow, this is just stunning. Yeah, there was a bunch of weird stuff laying around the crime scene. That's what I like to call it.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
How about that piece of the landing gear they found recently, or they reported that they found it?
Well, even there, you know, the real problem with the 9/11 official narrative begins at the Pentagon, because, of course, immediately after the event, you had a bunch of people taking pictures. There wasn't much airline debris, and it gets even murkier when, and I did this in the book. I went through a bunch of statements of eyewitnesses, you know, who are on the freeway that's going around the Pentagon. And, you know, you read these eyewitness statements, and it's a bizarre list. Some of these people do see an airliner. Some of them don't see an airliner. Some of them, many of them, have the airliner doing cartwheels. You know, a wing hits the ground, and the thing does cartwheels and slams into the building. So things are being described that are, you know, nowhere make the official narrative. Then you've got I forget what her name is, April somebody, that, you know, had her child in a daycare center inside the Pentagon where she was working. And, you know, she comes right out and says, I didn't see any airplane debris. So you've got all of these contradictory eyewitness statements that muddy the waters even further. But the bottom line is that there's sufficient numbers of these statements to question the whole official narrative. This is where the 9/11 narrative really began to unravel, was with the Pentagon, not so much with the World Trade Center. But once it started to unravel, then, of course, people started focusing on the World Trade Center and coming up with these different mechanisms. And again, the philosophical problem I have with most of them is that they're thinking in terms that there's only one murderer and therefore only one mechanism. That's the problem. I think there's many mechanisms in play. I think there's good evidence for all four of those mechanisms. And if that's the case, then you're dealing with a different set of murderers. We're back at the Agatha Christie scenario, where everyone had a motive, means, and actually did commit the murder of the corpse. So this is a different scenario I'm proposing than most of the 9/11 truth community is proposing. Absolutely.
You know, it's really strange, and I think this may be part of it. Of course, there are so many things about that whole event in New York that are sketchy. The engine that didn't belong to any of the aircraft that were alleged to, you know, that thing. It's like this motor doesn't even go to any of these planes. Then recently they found a piece of landing gear or something between two buildings in a really narrow alleyway, and people saw planes, and other people didn't see planes. And I'm looking at this article by Psychology, was published on July 26th of 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And I just recently saw it appear again in a one-liner on Drudge Report.
Mm-hmm.
But it's possible to remember something that never really happened. In one experiment, researchers showed volunteers images and asked them to imagine other images at the same time. Later, many of the volunteers recalled the imagined images as real. So using fMRI, the researchers were able to determine which parts of the brain formed the false memories and which formed the real ones. And here's the quote from Northwestern University scientist Kenneth Paller. We think parts of the brain used to actually perceive an object and to imagine an object overlap. I mean, I wonder how many people were subjected to any of that.
Well, I do think that if you allow for the existence of an exotic energy weaponry bringing down the Twin Towers, then you have to allow for all of those remote mind manipulation technologies by electromagnetic means as possibly being in play on that day. Because, again, the statements of people are so badly obfuscated, particularly in the case of the Pentagon, So again, if that's in play, then you're dealing with a very sophisticated player. This is not just some rogue network within the American security structure planning a bunch of drills mirroring aspects of 9/11. They've got access to some very sophisticated technology, and that implies an even deeper player. So I don't rule it out. What you're describing there is a phenomenon that is now kind of being talked about on the internet called the Mandela effect, where people are remembering different times for the deaths of prominent individuals. And again, I think that this is a phenomenon you'd have to entertain on 9/11. Is something like that in play? I'm not one of those that thinks there were no airplanes flying into the Twin Towers. I'm certainly not one of those, because there's too many witnesses that see them. But I do think that, the whole idea, which the media, this is very interesting, and this to me indicates level 2. On 9/11 itself, the media very quickly began putting out the idea that, well, there's a danger the towers might collapse from burning airplane fuel. And of course, I'm looking at the fires burning in the Twin Towers at the time, and I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. This is black smoke. These are oxygen poor, cool fires, number one. So if you look at the media, what they're doing is they're already putting out a spin, and within a matter of minutes, they were talking about bin Laden and terrorism and driving that meme. So that to me indicates level 2. They've reached their conclusion, and the conclusion, is contrary to the physical evidence you see on the screen with the black smoke. And the other problem there was, when the South Tower was struck with flight, or I forget the number, you saw that huge plume of ejecta of, the fuel burning out the other side. So these fires, as far as I'm concerned, were nowhere near hot enough to bring down the towers by the official story. Nowhere near. So some other mechanisms involved. So yeah, could they be playing with people's memories at the same time? You betcha they could. Absolutely.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to toss this into the mix here from that same Psychology Today article. Anyone who watches TV courtroom dramas knows that memory cannot be trusted. Eyewitnesses believe that their recall is complete and perfect, but in truth, memories are, at best, sensory and emotional impressions blurred by imagination, belief, ambiguity, and time. As convincing as juries may find the testimony of witnesses, good prosecutors know that human memory is, more often than not, the least reliable source of evidence. And that's fairly well known to anybody who's been around, particularly criminal lawyers, for any time at all. And there's just a little bit more here. It says that's true for several reasons. For one, attitudes and beliefs can affect the memories we form. Scientists at Cornell University told college students a story about a man who walked out on a restaurant bill. Half the participants were told that the man was a jerk who liked to steal. The other half were told that the man left without paying because he received an emergency phone call. 1 week later, the people who were told he was a jerk remembered a higher bill, from 10 to 25% more than the bill actually was. Those who were told he had an emergency phone call remembered a slightly lower than actual bill. Investigator David Pizarro said negative evaluations are capable of exerting a distorting effect on memory.
Right.
Which is why, anybody who's gone on any kind of an op or a mission of any kind, military or otherwise, knows that when you return from that mission, it doesn't matter how tired you are. You debrief right then. Because if you don't, you will cease to recollect, and you will begin to rationalize what must have happened rather than what actually did happen.
Right. Well, this again is exactly what I think you see in play on 9/11 with the major corporate-controlled media, is you see them putting out an interpretation already prior to any examination of the facts. So people begin immediately to think, well, planes crashed into the towers and the towers crashed as a result of that. And you short-circuit the process not only of memory, but you short-circuit the process of examination and investigation. So that, again, to me is an indicator that this was a planned event. When I remember seeing on Fox News on that day an interview with somebody that clearly was an actor, and I thought so at the time, that was saying, yeah, and there's a possibility, this average guy supposedly on the streets of New York, yeah, the airplane fuel is burning, and that might collapse the towers. So there the meme is planted already.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it's fairly clear by now that the 9/11 truth community has pointed out so many holes in that argument that this is just an implausible explanation. It's the magic bullet theory of 9/11. But yeah, the fact that the media is already trying to do, just like your experiment suggests, by planning a certain interpretation already on the event, means that this is a scripted thing. And therefore, terrorists hijacking planes and flying them into buildings for the greater glory of Allah isn't really probably the script that we're dealing with here.
No.
It's something deeper.
Speaking of Allah and just jerking the wheel radically to the left or right, how about both? Do you believe that the reason that these, now Mr. Celente, whom I respect a lot and like him very much,
mm-hmm.
When I said, when I asked him earlier, do you believe that the reason that this country is being seeded with people from Islamic countries is in furtherance of some sort of a problem here later,
yes,
as soon as the bugle is blown? And he said, but he took the side that'd be pretty easy to take, which is that, if somebody blew up my wedding party and killed my wife and a couple of kids and some friends, I'd instantly strap on a chest pack and go find them. He didn't say those words, but that was the message. That,
right.
We've inflamed the breasts of these people and filled them with a terrible resolve. And now, they're sad and they're mad and they hate us and they want to come for us. I get that. But that flies in the face of Obama clearing all these people who are undocumented from all these different countries in the Middle East and just letting them in and resettling them all over the country. Do you see this? I'll go first. I see this as putting a bunch of sleepers in place, waiting for the call.
Yes, I agree. And I agree simply because in my conclusion about 9/11, I do think that the third level of this penetrated operation was some sort of fascist international network. And the connections between Nazism and what I like to call weaponized Islam are there for all to see. These connections begin during World War II, and they continue after World War II. Again, look at Mohammed Atta and his very weird connections with these outfits. Look at Francois Genoud. So if you want to spread chaos and take out your old enemy, the U.S. of A., what do? Well, you flood it with a bunch of people, sleeper cells, as you call them, that are waiting for the signal. And again, I think this is an agenda whose jig is up because, Trump is expressing exactly the correct and rational approach to things. It's okay for us to welcome immigrants, certainly, but you want to vet them. You want to make sure that you're not inviting in terrorists. The other thing I think is going on here is the good old Democratic Party strategy of inviting all these people in and putting them in states that you want to swing to the Democratic Party because these people will vote Democratic. So you've got that. It's the power play that we've seen perfected in California being spread now to a nationwide basis. So I think both of these scenarios are in play. I think it will backfire tremendously if they ever push that button and call out these sleeper cells. I think they've radically underestimated the response to this. Let's put it this way. Soros and company, Russian intelligence knows where they live. That's, I need to say no more than that.
Yep.
And I suspect quite a few other intelligence networks do as well. So they're playing a very dangerous game. with some very, very dangerous people. And I just think if they push that button, your best laid plans, when you start to roll the war dice, always go wrong. Always, without fail.
It's interesting. You have reflected a great part of Michael Moore's latest rant that whatever happens now in the country by way of terrorist activity directed at us is now automatically Trump's fault. I wonder if these people are smart enough. I wonder if they're smart enough to know, okay, Obama's running out of office. He's been here for 2 terms. He's going to be gone pretty soon. We want to carry on our agenda. So let's hedge our bets a little bit. If we bring all these people in and a Democrat candidate wins the White House in the 2016 election, okay, we're good. We've got plenty of voters. If it turns out it's a Republican, and worst case scenario, somebody who wants to upset our agenda, then we have plenty of people in place that can cause problems for which the new president will be blamed, and we'll lay the groundwork for that by having pigs like Michael Moore. And I said, Michael Moore, I think you're a pig. That's my personal opinion. I'll say it to your face. All I ask is a chance. They're already putting out people like that. Michael Moore, like him or hate him, he's still a pretty high-profile guy, right? And he's already laying the groundwork for the blame to go to Trump if anything happens. Already, and the man hadn't even taken office yet. You see the left trying to do all sorts of crazy things.
The election was hacked by the Russians. And again, I dismiss that story simply because the Russians have nothing to gain by trying to do anything like that, particularly should they be exposed. And secondly, there's not much evidence for it. But when they're putting out memes like this, such as Moore is putting out, they're laying the groundwork for something to happen, which they can then blame on Trump. The problem is, I don't think people will buy it.
I don't think they will either. But what's even worse, Joseph, is it's possible. I wonder if they know something is going to happen. If they're the favored darlings of the corrupted, bought and paid for, in my opinion, traitorous, if not treasonous, mainstream media. I do think they know something simply on the basis of statistical averages. You bring in that many people, you know that there's got to be sleepers in all of that. So they know something simply on that basis alone. Whether they have inside information or not, that may be true too. The problem that they have is they have cut their own credibility. They put this stuff out and no one is believing it. And they will be the first ones to be blamed rather than President Trump once he takes office. So I think this again, we're going back to what we said earlier. The current elite is just incredibly stupid. And they're showing their stupidity by talking about these things because they're going to be the ones to be blamed because the source of that whole thing is all right. If let's look at it this way. If you think that this influx of immigrants is going to stage something against Mr. Trump, Mr. Moore, then why were you in support of Obama's policies to bring them in the first place? So in other words, it's going to backfire on them in a major, major way. They're showing their stupidity once again for all to see. I think the only thing that does, if they try something like that, is that strengthens Trump's hand immeasurably, particularly with what I think is this little internecine warfare now between the military and some of the intelligence apparatus and the CIA. So I think this strengthens his hand immeasurably should they try something like that. It backfires on them in every way. So they may not try it. This is just, to me, it's just more of their stupidity on parade. Stupidity on parade.
Well, it is.
Well, here it is from the Daily Banter. You might enjoy this. I'll be brief, Joseph. Michael Moore, quote, Donald Trump is going to get us all killed. I've been saying for about 2.5 years now, we need to get rid of this Obama guy before he gets us all killed. I find it interesting that these are almost the same words. And after he's done with that, this is what kind of a moron Michael Moore is. He says Donald Trump is going to get us all killed, and after he's done that, he's going to declare a state of emergency to permanently seize power. Well, seize power over but the citizens are all dead if he gets us all killed, right?
Right.
And here you go. This is a common fear that's starting to congeal among the left about the threat of Donald Trump occupying the Oval Office. When the next major terrorist attack occurs on American soil, kiss your civil rights goodbye. Giving a voice to this fear, Michael Moore took to Facebook on Tuesday to let loose a barrage of well-earned rage at the laziest, most dangerously incompetent president-elect in American history. And this little puke who wrote this article is named Justin Rosario. You know, I just, oh, God. Forgive me for wanting my Ray Donovan edition baseball bat and a crowd of these people. And just let me have 2-3 tequilas, and here we go.
Well, these people are simply nuts. They have no real understanding of the concept of blowback from covert operations of that sort. I don't think it would, if they try anything like that, I don't think a President Trump is going to try and curtail civil liberties, because if he did, he's undercutting his own basis of political support.
Well, yeah.
It's just craziness. These people are desperate to undo the election any way they can. And, all of it's falling flat. More, I'm with you. I sometimes marvel at the guy because he puts out such nonsense and he doesn't think things through. If they do try something like this, John, and try to blame it on Trump, all he has to do is point the finger at the people that were saying these things in the first place and say, well, you must have known something. They're they're slitting their own political throat is what they're doing. They're just appearing stupid and unreasonable. And if they go through with a scenario like that, it gets them nowhere. It undercuts their support even more. I don't understand it.
Well, it could be that Michael Moore's relevance is fading, and so he had to say something outrageous to put himself back in the spotlight.
Bingo. This is what's happening across the board. Their relevance is, well, they don't have any relevance. The corporate controlled media bias against Trump was, so pronounced. The skewed polls and everything else. The idea that voting fraud was all done by Republicans in favor of him, and that the Democrats did none of it. I'm sorry.
But the voting machines were flipping Trump votes to Hillary votes, but he's the one who's responsible for the hacking. Yeah, that's genius, isn't it?
Yeah, real.
Oh, my gosh. If it were not for sane men like yourself, and women too, who are putting out some credible, well-researched, well-written, and utterly and totally worthwhile books, articles, documentaries and so forth, like Trevor Loudon's The Enemies Within. That's a good one if you hadn't seen it. If you want to see it, I'll send you a copy of the DVD. I'm telling you, it will stun you. You probably already know this stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if you did already. But all these Muslim Brotherhood cats and all these socialist and communist aficionados that are just seeded throughout the United States government apparatus, you just can't believe it. I was told by a real no-kidding security services, let's say a civil servant, years ago, that Islamics had penetrated every level of every security service with their private emails encrypted and all this stuff, and their operation goes on. It doesn't skip a beat. I think the revolution has just started. The first shot that was fired, so to speak, is the election of Donald Trump. And if they try and take this election away from him, I think we should raise hell right up to ground level and just light it up.
Well, I think if they do try anything like that, I think you will see pushback of some sort. I don't know what kind, but there's no way that they will get away with it without some sort of response. But,
that's putting it mildly. I like that. That was very diplomatic, Joseph.
Yeah, it's an inevitability. there is a revolution taking place in so many respects. The corporate controlled media is revealed for what it is. Certain segments of the federal government is revealed for what they are. And it's interesting to see that, even within the American deep state, and you see some of these people in Trump's appointments, there's pushback from within. So this is going to be a very, very interesting time period. I tell people, watch the first 100 days very carefully. Watch the period from the inauguration to the State of the Union for what executive orders Trump signs and what executive orders he overturns. Watch very carefully what he says in the State of the Union speech and that first 100 days when he's filling out the rest of his appointments. That's going to be a crucial indicator of where he wants to take things.
Well, may I just say, it's been a pleasure speaking with you again. You've been very gracious with your time, and it's been a very, very enriching and enlightening conversation. Man, you nailed a bunch of points just right on the head, and I'm very grateful to you for doing that, and I'm happy to have a forum where you can do it. I also want to wish you a Merry Christmas or whatever holiday you may or may not celebrate, but I always say Merry Christmas.
You too, Merry Christmas.
Bless you for that. And about Giza Death Star, now if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, you were telling me earlier that you can see a list of your books in the order that they were written, yeah?
Yeah, under the About tab on the website, you can find a little bio of me, and then scroll down and you'll find all of the books in the order that they were written. I also have a web store that they can order the books right off the website. Fantastic.
God bless you, sir. Thank you for what you're doing. It's I feel a little bit better having you in the world, so stay safe out there, will you?
Thank you. You do the same, John. Again, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you, and thanks for having me back on.
Anytime. We'll talk after the New Year, all right? Or not after the New Year, during the New Year. All right. I got it straight. Take care now.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Dr. Joseph Farrell, everybody. Wow, was that something or was that something? It's exciting. But, all this talk about the Ray Donovan baseball bat and all that, it's like, if it were not for my fear of the Lord, there'd be a lot of people up on Boot Hill right now. So if he can control me, imagine what he can do for you. Exercise caution in your daily affairs. Eyes up always. Sharpen those critical thinking skills. By the time, I've been saying that for so long that I suspect your critical thinking skills are already pretty sharp. And I'm also pretty sure that you can see through this desperate attempt to inspire fear of a Trump presidency. The only people who should feel any fear are the crooks, the rats that are running for the exits right now, only to find there's no place to run, because on the other side of each of those exits they're fleeing to and through, there's a cat like one of us waiting on the other side. God bless. Be seeing you.